Before I call the meeting to order, we have a new commissioner this morning. I'd like to introduce Sam Collier. Sam is new to us, and we're certainly glad to have him and appreciate him volunteering to be on the P&Z committee. Look forward to working with him. So if you've not met Sam, take the time maybe to introduce yourself and so forth. So Sam, good to have you. Thank you for being with us.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Collier, this morning.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of December 22nd, 2020.
I move we approve the minutes.
Terry moves we approve.
Second.
Jim seconds. Question discussion on the motion to approve minutes 2020, December. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. Financial report, Steve, you giving that, please? Here. All right.
And I'm going to attempt to do my presentation from here and then sit back down unless you guys have questions. But Jerry's provided this high-tech mic system here for us on the back of his truck, and it's obviously appreciated. I won't sing or dance or anything, but financial reports in your packet, December 2020. It's an interesting financial report, you know, it's a mid-year report. You got the percentages on the far right, so you can do a budget comparison. We're glad to answer any questions you might have. Looks a little bit off on the revenue side, slightly, because we did not get our county appropriation until January, right after the first year, so that's missing about $17,500 in there, so that throws that off. But we did get that right after January, which pushes our revenues back up to about 54%. But I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Steve on financial? Hearing none, motion to approve. Jim moves. Ben seconds. Question discussion on the motion to approve financial. Hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Construction sureties, item D.
Okay, construction sureties, that summary packets in just for your information. Again, we got several projects done. We coordinated effort with the city last month and pulled several thousands of dollars, almost $26,000 off that cash bond list through the completion of 2 projects. And what we've got on the agenda today that needs your review is there's a letter of credit that times out in February 27, 2001 for Hunt Farm Section 4, $11,500 for sidewalk construction. We need you guys to renew that letter of credit for another year in the same amount, $11,500. The reason we're doing it this month is that the letter of credit times out before we'll meet next month. The bank has indicated we'll have the letter of credit by the 17th. We don't actually have it in our possession yet because it actually is due. So I would suggest if you guys are okay with that, there will be a motion to renew that letter of credit for year 2 in the amount of $11,500 for Hunt Farm Section 4 for sidewalks. but that be conditioned on us receiving the letter of credit by February 17th. If there's some chance we don't get it, we'll come back next month and come to plan B. But Mr. Sharp's contacted me, the bank's contacted me, and the letter of credit is in progress, and we should have it hopefully this week. I'm glad to answer your questions about that project.
Questions? Motion to approve. Terry motion to approve the Hunt Farm letter of credit pending we received it on time. Second, Vince. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Item E, subdivision approval.
Lisa's going to do these if she wants to come over here. She's prepared to do those, or I've summarized and Lisa, whatever you want to do. Lisa's prepared to do them. Come on over here, I'll let you part.
Okay, for our plaques this month, we're starting, for our plaques this month, we're starting with Whispering Woods subdivision. Scriven and Shepherd have applied to subdivide, creating 9 tracts from the property that's named property number 2, parcel 11, 12.6 acres, all fronting on Ugas Road. All zones ag. AG is the surveyor. The flag's correct, and it's ready for final approval today.
Question. If this is approved, what are we gonna do about our lack of water pressure that we already have?
I'll address this real quick.
No, I want you to answer me now.
Yeah, I'm going to address you, right, real quick, is what I said. So, and then Vincent will speak, he's a little closer to the mic. So this is a plat to cut 9 lots off on one side of Nevius Road. The subdivision regulations in Article 4 lay out a standard for basically cutting up property, chopping off lots. It's a technical review when we subdivide a property, whether we're cutting up 1 acre or 2 acre. A lot of these lots are 1.6, 1.7. The lack of water pressure that's possibly in this area of Fremont.
It's not possible.
Okay.
It's not.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, be quiet.
Hey,
We already have
Okay.
lack of water pressure.
Okay, I'm going to answer you, but I want to make sure the chair controls this meeting and people speak when they're acknowledged here. I'm going to answer it if you want to reply, that's great. I'm going to say the water pressure, if it's low, is not a plat review item under the current Danville County subdivision regulations. The water pressure out there would be the controlling jurisdiction that runs the water. And if there's a need by the neighborhood, then that need needs to be directed at the Bull County subdivision regulations as a plat requirement technical process. Does not evaluate water pressure, the location of fire hydrants, drainage. It is technically, do they meet the minimum lot size of the ag district? They got to show us the setbacks. And in this case, we had another neighbor call me personally, say, hey, this seems like a lot of lots on a narrow road. What about that? That's not a standard in the existing ordinance
Bill
either.
Blair's car is 7 feet wide. We measured the road, it's 11 feet.
Right.
You know what?
That is not the standard either, but that is something that potentially the county could address through an amendment in the ordinance in the future on what type of roads and how wide it takes to do a subdivision plan.
Come on. I see how this is working.
So that's our first plat. And to build back on for you guys, because I was looking this way, one of the issues in the subdivision regs are there other things that happen when we subdivide property, especially on narrow county roads. You know, we don't have the ability, for example, to require a developer to widen that road to 20 feet in the recordation of this plat. As you all know, if we build a new street, we got a ton of standards, about sidewalks and street widths and curbs and everything, but on the existing county road, maybe someday in the future, the county will want to tell us directly that, hey, we don't cut off property on, let's say, less than 16-foot wide roads or 18-foot wide roads. But we have no existing standard that would prohibit you guys from approving the plat on an 8-foot wide road. But it's a problem, and we recognize that 9 lots on this road, we did 3 last month on the other side. That's 12 new lots on a narrow county road that probably can't handle the traffic or the construction. But there's no mechanism in our current plan to prohibit you guys from recording this plat if it's technically correct. I think we have an old set of subdivision regulations. We've amended Articles 1, 2, 3, and 7. 5 and 6 are the technical standards, and we need the city and the county to come together. It's been posted on my desk since 2018. But we need to get together and talk about the road standards, the width, the depth, the sidewalks. Engineers are busy, and they got other dudes, but it's been tough to get the crew together to go down through those regulations, and then there's a policy decision on those county roads that only really the fiscal court can address. The manager of that area has actually brought that up and said, we need to figure this out, because we got another road in the county that's got a similar problem. We actually got several roads in the county that I'll call substandard, narrow roads, no shoulders, that there's some justification that there could be a policy that we don't subdivide properties and build new homes until there's some improvement achieved, either by the government or the developer. It would be a new style of development for Boyle County, and it's something that may need to be addressed. This is a classic case. That is 9 lots on a very narrow road if you drove out there and looked at it. Yes, sir.
I'm a process kind of guy, so I'm asking the question. It seems right now that we're backing ourselves into a corner by saying there's nothing that prohibits us from doing this. And I'd like to know what you all think about what's your own opinions on what your red line is on a slippery slope. Because if this is approved, you have an 11-foot wide road, okay, that has no shoulders, that drops off on both sides. And it seems to me that somebody somewhere ought to stand up and say, well, it's not my job, but I'm going to be the first person to say no on this. I walked it yesterday. I actually walked out there yesterday. And I'm thinking that from the county perspective, if the homes up on Persimmon Knob have to have holding ponds for septic, because the ground won't percolate, where there's actual soil, there's no soil there. It's rocky, it's wooded, and I'm telling you, you'll never get a permit to even put a septic leach field in any of those lots. So I'm thinking about the overall. It's not just whether the road is narrow, not just whether the water pressure is narrow. Think about what's going to be the people that have covenants up there already on minimum lot sizes and minimum house sizes. What's that going to do to the property values in the county? So I'm thinking, from a process standpoint, there's a lot more things to do than just water pressure. Who's going to be the person who stands up and says, well, we're not prohibited from doing this, but it's not a good idea?
All right, sir, if I can address that quickly, you've kind of framed this in terms of, well, nothing prohibits it. It's not really a question of nothing prohibits it, it's that we have nothing that permits us to deny it. If a plat meets all the requirements of our subdivision regulations, which staff has assured us that this does, we're not permitted to deny that plat. So that's the situation currently. Mr. Hunter has taken the opportunity to kind of describe the subdivision regulation process. He's addressed that this is something that we're going to change in the future. But that's where it is now, and as it stands today, we are not permitted to deny this plat.
And that's a statutory
That's under
requirement
Kentucky law.
in the state law.
The state's going to force you to do this, and then the people are then going to come back and say, well, you permitted me to buy this. Well, how are you going to then, is somebody then going to permit
No,
that?
it's going to be the next project. It's going to be caught by the new rules. It won't be this project.
If somebody buys a lot there, are they going to then be told, well, we let you buy the lot, so now we're gonna have to let you do whatever you want in place, or?
Again, we're kind of getting sidetracked a little bit on this technical, but the plat has technical aspects to create a dimensional plat. The actual physical construction of the house, whether it be under the building code, the health department's regulations for septic, water pressure, all of those things are independent of the planning commission's authority to review a plat under these current guidelines. So the houses that are out there, I hate to say it, as an incentive buyer beware. If you buy one of these 1.6 acre lots and you get ready to start your house and don't talk to the health department, you may have run into a problem. That's just the nature of development all across Kentucky. And until all these entities can somehow come together through the plat review process or the state laws revised, the planning commission's authority is limited to a dimensional kind of checklist standard on the physical look of the lot. But someday, the road issue, maybe even off-site, a mile away, could become tied into things of this nature. But we have to see what authority we have, look around the states, see other counties, and maybe make an attempt to address the issues you have, and then roll into our subdivision regulations through a formal amendment of this body. With obviously some guidance and acceptance from the two jurisdictions. Some cities, and I'll end it on this, some cities use the building permit process to address all of these issues, either through a bonding mechanism or an extra supersized CO at the end of the construction project that makes the builder or homeowner go through several hoops. Other states do that before you can ever move into the house on all of the issues you just mentioned. But we don't have that authority in the Kentucky state law currently.
Do you have any authorities, are there any authorities that you all have here where you can look at this and say, we legally must be committed to plat, I understand that, but we're not going to allow a sub-development?
The county would have to amend the building permit process and either require a bonding mechanism, time to pull a permit, or impose a standard, a development standard independent of our document. For example, to say that we do no home construction on any road, let's say narrower than 18-foot wide road. So basically, any road in this county that's less than 18, nobody builds until either you build the road or the state or the county builds it.
Is there any interest in actually doing that? Genuine interest here?
We've not studied it to that point. It's obviously, this is one of the more extreme plats we've seen, but this is not an isolated situation. If we inventory all county roads, we have to get the county and ask them how many roads are less than, let's say, 16-foot wide. Who knows, it could be 500 miles, I don't know, we're speculating. So there's
You don't
no...
have to do that until somebody actually wants to build on it. You don't have to inventory all roads in the county.
Right, but we're going to institute a policy, we need to see what the real effect and what the real impact would be, because if all of a sudden we set a standard of 16-foot wide roads, and we shut down home building in the entire county, that's the impact. If we set a standard, maybe then we need to make it 18, because that's the middle ground. But if we were to say no building on less than 16-foot wide road, there's a good chance we wouldn't have 400 building permits last year, we might have had 10. And you got a lot of people that have bought property that all of a sudden can't build a house. Well, it's something we want to address with the county. We're dragging on. We've got a ton of cases, you guys. This is a pretty minor plat. We really have gone through the technical review. We've got 2 more. We've got 4 major zone changes to get through, and we've got a 4-hour time limit on our police here. Yes, sir.
I'll be over there, okay? And I don't think if I do anything sitting on you, microphone, then approve and disapprove. That's fine.
If we use the microphone,
That's what they have to do. Can you hear me? Well, what I was saying is I actually live up there, and which is some of my neighbors are here. And I know that these fellows up front and lady are here to approve or disapprove, which is their job, and that's fine. Just what I'm saying is, what about the people that live there? Do we not have a say, and do we want all these extra houses or not? I moved to county to get away from all the big subdivision. I lived in the subdivision for a while, but now I got a few acres, and I kind of want to keep it that way, but if I have no say-so, then who does? Which, my neighbors, so that's just my interest. I just need to know, do we have a say-so by living there or not?
Let me just add, my anybody comes in and wants to divide property, and it's technically correct, we have no authority to deny that. Secondly, with this specific plat, that doesn't mean that any of these lots are acceptable for building on. That's between the person who owns it now and the person who wants to buy it. That's not our decision as to whether these are acceptable to build on. It's simply legal for them to divide the property as they meet the regulations. Correct, Avery?
That's
Well,
correct.
they wouldn't divide the property if they didn't see the potential for building. That would be ridiculous. That would be a waste of time and money on their part.
That's their choice, not ours. If you've got property and you want to divide it, that's up to you if you meet the regulations. We don't control whether it's good or not to build on. That's between the buyer and the seller. That's not P&Z's decision, period.
What they're doing is nothing further than what the property is already zoned for. They're doing something that is permitted under the zoning ordinance, and that's why this is a matter of just routine, check the box approval by this commission. It's a technical matter and nothing further.
And if it's perfectly legal, what recourse do we have to say, no, we're not going to do it because we don't like it? If it's perfectly legal, we don't have any choice in the matter.
Then why haven't we?
This is not a hearing, this is an administrative review. Plats have to be approved through an administrative function. The public hearings are later. This is like us approving our minutes in a sense. This is a technical review. This is not a public hearing. We're allowing folks to speak because you guys are concerned, but this is not a public hearing.
Steve, isn't it true that if these people want to address this issue, they need to go to the fiscal court?
Yeah, and I appreciate them all being here because I had a really good conversation with the neighbor, and this has come up really only once before in my 3.5 years. But this plat is definitely, I drove out there. Neil Road's another one that's come up. This is absolutely where we need to go, and the county is on this. It's on our to-do list. I think we're going to have a solution, and these neighbors being here, I think, help, because this is a real deal that we need to address. This is a narrow road with 12 new lots on it, and, you know, it's, how much is too much? But we have to get with the fiscal court and the technical folks, Dwayne Campbell, city engineer, and talk about these development standards, that then maybe we can put something in the ordinance that will give us the authority to look at these plats in a different light. And I appreciate folks being here, and we suspect that this plat will have some discussion. This is not a public hearing, and again, to be fair to the planning commission, this plat is technically correct under Article 4 and 3 of the subdivision regulations 100%.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
Hey, Gary, there's one other gentleman in the back, and I apologize. But you-
Beat the dead horse.
No, I just got, P&Z is here to protect the community, am I not correct? And two, he says it goes to the building inspector on these subdivisions, and I'm okay with that. But he lives in Lincoln County, he doesn't care about Bull County, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you that. I live where? You live in Lincoln County. Yeah. That's right, that's right. So, when you want to talk about, let's go back to the building inspector, Jefferson County has a intent to disturb the land. This man says you're not building until you start moving dirt, it's not building. But you are building when you move dirt. You know exactly what you're doing. P&Z could easily stop this stuff by putting that into effect. Because I don't know, there's a house sitting up there on Green Ridge right now that can't pass. It won't perk, it don't have a septic tank. But the building inspector down here, let it get built. So, my thing is you all, as P&Z, need to protect the people in this community. That's your job. If you disagree with me, then you don't need to be on the board. That's all I got to say.
Sir, if I understand you correctly, then you're right, that this is something that needs to be folded into the ordinance and the subdivision regulations, and it's now abundantly clear and to the attention of all the commission, to staff, and it'll be brought to the attention of fiscal court and the city commission as well. That's what we were able to do today.
Thank you.
Motion.
All right, can you all hear me better now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, are we ready for a motion on this technically?
We'll just do all three of them.
Pardon?
We'll do all three of them.
All three of them, okay. Next we've got True, Diddy, and the Interest Group have applied for a subdivision plat to create 4 tracts from their 39-acre property all tracts are between 9 and 10 acres, they're all zoned ag. This plat is technically correct, ready for final approval. And next, we have the Coulter family by Roland Coulter. They applied for the subdivision of 126 plus acre parcel on Lebanon Road. The plat retraces and combines existing tracts to redivide it into tract 21, or 2I, I guess, excuse me, at 104 plus acres, 2G and 22 plus acres. They front Lebanon Road, and 2G fronts Kentucky 300 in Parksville. The property is zoned to ag. It's technically correct, ready for final approval and commissioner's signature today.
Questions or discussion from the commission? Hearing none, a motion to approve. Jim, excuse me, Terry moves to approve. Vince seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve these three subdivision approvals. Hearing none, all in favor, vote unanimous. Folks, just let me say that the planning commission operates under the Kentucky revised statutes. And if something is technically correct and meets all those statutes, what did you tell that person that we didn't approve? We have no basis, no grounds, and that goes straight to court and we lose. So we don't have any choice but to approve things that are technically correct and meets the standards and meets the regulations. So it may or may not be a good thing for that particular area in and of itself. But again, if you bring something and it meets all the regulations for approval, what do we tell you? No, we're not going to approve that because we don't like it. We just can't do that. And our lawyer said, if it meets the regulations, we don't have any choice in the matter. And if there are issues like Steve has addressed, fiscal court is the place to take that and get it changed. But we don't have the authority to just up here and change it or make a decision to disapprove something because it's not in the best interest of our thinking, because KRS requires us to approve it. So, Henry, are we okay with that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, have you ever disapproved anything?
Not that was technically correct. You can't legally disapprove.
Ever disapproved anything?
We've disapproved things that weren't technically correct, yes. When it didn't meet the regulations or meet the standards, yes, we've disapproved many things, but nothing that was technically correct or met the standards. 100% approval always. Okay. Public hearings. Public hearings are open to the public. We proceed by having those folks that are in favor of the proposed public hearings or rezoning to come forward and speak in favor. Then we give an opportunity for those that are in opposition to it. And once we hear everybody speak, then we as a commissioner discuss it. On those, we do have the authority to approve or disapprove by statute. That's why we have the public hearing on it. KRS gives us the authority to approve or disapprove with regard to those things because they require the commission to approve or disapprove it before anything can happen. So I would request that if you want to speak very loud or come to the mic. And secondly, we don't need any repetitiveness. If somebody has already told us they're for it because X and X and X, we don't need the next person to come up and say, I'm for it for the same reasons as the next person and the next person. But once we hear it, we have heard it. Same thing, if you're against it, we don't need to hear 10 times the same reasons why you're against it. And that's just a matter of being efficient. We want to be polite and courteous, but at the same time, we want to be effective and efficient and not be here till 4 o'clock this afternoon. For whatever reasons that we just don't have time to do it. So, I'd ask you to limit your talk to just 2 or 3 minutes, whether you're speaking for or against, and we will proceed from there. Anything, Henry, you want to add?
No, I agree with everything you said. We're trying to build a record today. Once evidence has been admitted, to stand up and just say, I agree with what so-and-so said, that's just fine.
And I would also add, if you're new, Henry is our attorney, and he represents us from the legal standpoint to make sure we always step hopefully in the right direction and don't get offline like we should. So he's kind of keep us on the straight and narrow. So if you didn't know who Henry is, he is our attorney. So I just wanted to make that clear. So that's why I want to refer to him, keep me online. Okay, so number one, first public hearing, LMD Holdings LLC has filed an application to rezone property on tract of land containing 30.765 acres located at 1695 Lancaster Road, Danville, Kentucky. The requested zone change is from agriculture, AG, and highway business to light industrial. Anyone here who wants to speak in favor of? Steve, we're on public hearing number one.
All right, sorry about that. Just folks have some extra questions out there
I understand.
about who their elected officials were. I think that's the proper format. So we're on public hearing number one.
Correct.
Woo! All right, I'm ready. So the first staff report we have is the zone change request that was filed on November 3rd, 2020. The applicant is LMD Holdings LLC. And just to refresh your all's memory, this is the new distillery going on the east side of Danville on Highway 52. Right there, just past the curve, Old Lancaster Road and Lancaster Road right there. Additionally, this applicant came before you guys in December of 19 to do what's called a future land use map amendment from basically low density to mixed use employment. That application was successful. And then behind that, they brought a zone change forward, I think January of 2020, I believe. And as you guys remember, we had some issues about their concept plan, some of their conditions, or lack thereof. We asked the applicant to kind of go back to the drawing board. We tabled the application. We tabled it for a few months. Pandemic broke out. We didn't meet. And at some point, when working with the applicants, we asked them to withdraw the case until they could kind of get us a concept plan and get us some conditions. And so now here we are. They filed the application actually in November. And here we are in January because we couldn't meet, have a public meeting, do different executive orders from the governor and whatnot. So they've had this thing kind of sit here ready to go since November. They're ready to move forward with the construction phase if this zone change is successful for basically what the first part of the development would be the construction of a brick house or two. And I'll walk you through the staff report fairly quickly. I'm going to do all the staff reports the same so we're consistent. But basically there is a concept plan in your packet. We don't have our PowerPoint up here for citizens and for what you guys see, but there's a nice concept plan in our color concept plan. There's also a set of conditions that have been brought forward by the applicant, and I'll walk you through those. So again, this property is 1695 Lancaster Road. Current zoning is agriculture, and there's a little bit of highway business up there on the frontage. The property size that's being zoned is 30.765 acres. This is a bigger farm, but they are zoning a smaller portion of that parcel, as you guys know, which is, last time we looked at this, we were up close to 300 acres on the prior zone change request. So they brought a subset of that property down to zone to light industrial to simply focus on the brick house development and the distillery operations. The proposed zoning is light industrial. The existing land use is agriculture. The zoning history, agriculture is the original zone for the property. And you guys heard it has two zoning districts currently on the property. Page 2 of your staff report, we get into our general development plan review. Article 310.3.e of the zoning ordinance, as you know, requires as a condition of granting a zone change request, the general development plan has to be submitted. And in layman's terms, the general development plan is basically a list of conditions. So nobody can move forward with the zone change under our ordinance without either submitting a graphic concept plan or a written narrative or a combination thereof, which we call a general development plan. So basically the zoning ordinance is there, and then the next page, Article 3.11.2, again, says the same thing. We have to have a general development plan in a form that's recordable in the Bull County Courthouse. And then right there on page 3, right under that black line, you see that here is the conditions that are now been put forward. They are a lot more streamlined than last time of, I think, what we were asking for when we didn't have any, because now they focus the zoning down to just 30 acres, and it's all about the brick house and the industrial side. It's anticipated there will be future zone changes to commercial or even residential, to do the other elements of this master plan, but today's application is simply this 30 acres, and then so the conditions are way more simpler in nature because it focuses on the brick house. So the first condition says the applicant agrees that the total building area footprint for any single building should not exceed, actually that's a typo for any single, the total is 100,000 square foot. So what the applicants are saying that they agree that the total building footprint will not exceed 100,000 square foot. It says for any single building, and that's just a misprint there. But the buildings typically, as you know, the brick houses are about 20,000 square foot and go up. And what they're agreeing to is 100,000. So in theory, they could possibly get 4 or 5 brick houses before then they have to come back to you guys and bring in the next case. So this is really, again, phase 1. Says no building or property shall exceed a height of 6 stories. Number 2, the applicant agrees that use of the property is limited to distillery operation and associated uses for distillery operation, storage of distilled spirits, and agriculture uses under KRS 100-211. They also legislated out what we call some uglies that could be on the property. No adult entertainment, no automobile service, no petroleum service, no repair businesses, no self-storage units. Because the light industrial zoning, as you know, allows a lot of other things besides just doing the distillery. So that number 2 legislates out the potential for what we call some kind of ugly or unsightly or maybe not compatible land uses. And then the third condition says the applicant agrees that the portion of this property shall only have one direct construction access point to be served by Old Lancaster Road. So one of our concerns was Highway 52, their existing driveway, the curve, the site distance. To sort of deal with that issue and allow the applicant to get forward with the brick house development that's kind of right there in the curve, we've asked them to commit to the construction entrance, come off Old Lancaster Road off the farm they own down there about, I think the address is 80 Old Lancaster Road. So no entrances coming off 52 until a future phase where either the state fixes the road or we get into the next zone change to discuss what we're going to do about the highway and the entrance. The driveway stays as a farm driveway for the farm, but the construction and everything related to the brick house comes off this temporary access point off Old Lancaster Road. We met with the city manager at that time and talked about this with the applicant. That seemed amenable. It is meant to be temporary. So again, if they get this is approved and they get ready to build a brick house, they can't use that existing farm drive to go across country. Everything has to come off a new driveway or that existing driveway at the homestead on Old Lancaster Road. So those are the 3 conditions, and then with that I'll run into the comprehensive plan review. Page 4 of your staff report has their concept plan. Just note that the area in red is the area we're talking about for the distillery, but we're only halfway through that. The 30 acres is just those first 4 or 5 brick houses right there. The zone change is just those 30 acres. But they showed us the entire master plan they're working on in the main change. So that will get into the comprehensive plan review. Starts on the bottom of page 4. And as you guys know, every zone change request, it has to be reviewed for compliance with the comprehensive plan, which is the policies, the development review, the future land use map. There's a lot of stuff in Chapter 9, Chapter 1, Chapter 10, and the map and dependencies that we use to review zone change requests. So the first goal that we put in the staff report is just general land development. I just want to mention a few things about these first few goals that I think are relevant. The objective under that general land development goal says maintain the rural and agricultural cultural characteristics of Boyle County by promoting significant green space, by promoting agribusiness development, and by considering the impact of agriculture in each growth-related decision. And as you guys remember, part of their plan was to keep this property in somewhat farm production, tie this distillery together, and have kind of an open industrial style development for a distillery. So I just wanted to point out that objective. The second one, economic development, is an important goal we have in our comprehensive plan. And again, there's an objective that says assure high quality agricultural production through development of related agricultural businesses and support services. Just want to point that out to you guys. And then the third one is one that was in, again, these are the exact same goals and objectives you guys saw a year ago with the zone change. So there is one on historic preservation, and it says to encourage the identification, maintenance, and protection of significant historic buildings, structures, and fences, and other features throughout the education where appropriate designation of local historic district. I just want to mention there is a historic house on the property that's in somewhat disrepair. There is a historic rock fence that has, I think, historic easements to the state on that. Just want to point that out. That's one of the interesting dynamics when we were talking about the project before, how we were going to keep the integrity of the property, the rock wall for one, and then the developer was kind of giving you guys the vision for what the property would be as the distillery builds out. But the house is a concern. I know there's some officials with the city that brought it up and approached the developer about what are the plans for the house. But to be fair to you guys, the zone change is on a portion of the property. The house is on kind of the agriculture tract, but everything on the property is relevant, as you guys know, in the zone change request. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm sure the applicant's going to make a comment, maybe some other folks about that element. The planning commission's focus was on the development plan, the concept plan, and the brick house development as shown by those conditions. Other goals relate to transportation and land use, et cetera, et cetera. Get to page 6, we deal with our chapter 9, future land use. And page 7, we get into our development review provisions. And it says requested rezonings shall be reviewed with consistency with the future land use map and the development provisions below. So there's a lot of stuff in the comprehensive plan that we look at. And then it says all proposals for new development must be assessed to determine their compatibility with the existing surrounding development. And then the next page, page 8, we deal with our general guidance for development, industrial development. I won't go through all those bullets. And then our future land use map compliance language that's in our comprehensive plan in Article 9. And again, it says applicants for zone changes must demonstrate that the proposed use is consistent with the land use designation. However, consistency with the flume is only one of several considerations, as you guys know, with the criteria of approving the zone change under KRS 213. So with that, because your staff items of concern on number 9, the flume map is on page 9 at the top. As you guys know, that brown color there is the mixed-use employment designation that was amended a year prior ago from low density. This whole farm is shown as low density, and the future land map was amended to mixed-use employment, which allows a project like this where you have a mix of uses, whether it's industrial, commercial, multifamily, residential, or any combination thereof. So that category is a flex category that they amended to. And the LI rezoning request obviously is consistent with that flume designation. Bottom of page 9 is your KRS 100-213 findings that you guys have to make. And as you know, we have on page 11 our suggested motions, up or down, cookie cutter for you guys, then to get edited here by our legal counsel. So there's a motion, whichever direction you guys are headed as a format motion. That's all I have, unless you guys have any questions. The developer's here with his attorney. There may be other citizens who want to speak on this case. And I know this is awkward with this mic and back and forth, but I'll be glad to answer any questions or rebut anything that the commission directs me. But at this point, I'm going to follow the direction of my chairman and turn it over to the applicant.
I think we hear from, excuse me, the applicant.
That's these guys right here, so.
Y'all introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Francesco Viola. I'm the owner of the property. And I'm Matt Drower, Francesco's attorney.
Thank you.
I'm here to answer questions, or is there things you'd like me to design?
Questions for the owner or the attorney of the owner? If I can ask a question. Yeah, please.
The 6-story height relative to other heights in the Enville area, is it going to be higher than any other building? Are you familiar with that?
If you want to take a look at what brick house we're building, if you go to Woodlands Trail, the first brick house on the left, the smaller one,
Okay.
the bigger ones, that's what we intend to do.
Okay, yeah, because without going through that, I was curious with the height.
And that one's 5 stories. And that's really what we're focused on right now. So if you go to Wilderness Trail, as soon as you pull in the driveway to the visitor center, the one that is immediately on the left, that's about the size of the building.
In the first phase, how many brick houses are you going to build in the first phase?
I believe 2 to 4.
And then you'll continue to do that as necessary.
Yep, we plan on, as of right now, our plan is to, our intent is to build up to 10 on the property. And we do not want to take away too much of the agriculture. The farms we have, the things that we grow, going to the bottom of the So we want to keep that farm at the bottom. Very close to the property as much as possible.
the roads, entrances and so forth, are you all completely satisfied with that?
Part of the look and feel that we are working towards, and we're just still trying to work out with our architects. And they'll be here next week, so if anybody wants to meet with them, they'll be here. They're coming in from Chicago, Kansas next week. We are going to be available to talk to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But we're trying to keep the farm look like what it was like maybe in the 1700s or 1800s. Houses built. And so we're trying to find a different way of having roads. We can asphalt or concrete just doesn't look like something that was around back then. So we're still trying to figure out what would be appropriate. I know light industrial has the tools, but we're hoping that maybe we can have some figure out a way so that we can keep the look and feel like we're going back in time. That's really what we're trying to figure out how we can accomplish it. It's the rules of but they're not really
There's some questions with regard to the status of the house, with regard to repair and so forth. Could you elaborate on where you are and what the plans are going forward?
Yeah, early on with the house, the mayor, he took interest and we talked extensively in his office, he used to be Richard Gallister and his team shored it up years ago. It was already in pretty bad shape by the time we came to the property. We did not own the property a year ago. We had an option to buy it. We were trying to get all our approvals together first for the I felt like the community was behind us, and the community, the city was behind us, so I took a chance to go to the loop and bought the property. And so now we're trying to preserve it. The architects that, we have a couple teams of architects that we're working with, and I have the class permission to Nick Beaver, Nick White Associates. He's already been through the house inside and out at every level. Documented many photos. He's measured every square inch of the roof place. It's in really bad shape, and it's in bad shape before we got it. Try to save as much as we can. So, true, with full transparency, is part of it will have to come down, and we'll have to then rebuild it exactly with the same stone in order to make it safe for an exact replica of the work. And then our centerpiece of our, we're going to eventually design a village for that area. The centerpiece is that home. It's a very important part of our concept. I have a band called Little American Band. It's a song about the house. It's about urban in the back. Pick it up and everywhere on Spotify. Where we can get music. So I'm committed to it. We've been working with Jim Dean for nearly 2 years. Because the house is the women grow house. They don't trademark Cold Grow. And so we worked it out with them and came to an agreement that we can have a bottle called the William Grow House bottle. So we took 2 years to go through that. So we're already invested in that home. And we paid Richard McAllister over $60,000 to shore it up and save what we can. We have pallets of rock that have already fallen. It's all sitting there on pallets ready to be reassembled. So it's a safe form in place to have hopefully hundreds of thousands of visitors here at some point. As is, there's no way we can have one house here. We're comfortable walking in myself. So.
Any other questions from the commission? Go ahead.
The property that you're talking about rezoning right now is primarily east of the house, way to the east of your total holdings, or west east of your total holdings. The land that you're talking about rezoning right now is at the eastern end of the property you own, to the east of the old house. Is that correct?
It's, south of the home, west, on the western part of the property.
Could one of you show me on this map, this section it is?
Gentlemen, anything else you want to present? Say.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Gill, I was wondering if you had an idea of the kind of traffic that this will generate once the rig houses are built out, what kind of daily trips and kind of numbers like that?
Very minimal. I mean, we're just going to be bringing barrels into the barrels that we already have. We'll be putting them into our brick house, and the barrels that we make, we'll be going in there. And the barrels that we bottle, we'll then exit the exit bottle. But it's very minimal. I mean, there won't be any tourism, and so it's just very minimal traffic.
Comfortably less than 500 trips per day?
For sure. There'll be many days where there won't be any trips. So,
Any other questions, please?
In your original balloon change that you did a year ago, of course, you had the whole property, you had plans for the whole property. One of them was the house, do something with the house, put a visitor center or something, and do some other stuff with the land as well as your distillery and your rick house. And you were encouraging us about developing tourism, and now you're not talking like that's a problem.
Well, specifically for this plot, this part of the rezoning process specifically, it's a brick house to begin with, so there's not going to be tourism there, but overall, the property is expected to be a tourism draw when it's fully completed, and we're still dialing in on that plan, and we're planning to come in next week for.
But you're not asking for that to be rezoned.
not really. So we're just trying to get our building and some of the structures built so that we can start, making money to help finance the rest of what we're planning to do. But next week, our architects will be here, and we're gonna be dialing in exactly what we're gonna be doing. We've got some side-by-sides, and then traveling around the property, and really dialing in, and figuring it all out.
But since you're not asking for the house to be rezoned, there's really nothing to prevent you from doing nothing to that house system.
Yeah, I mean, we're just asking for the 30 acres south of the home right now. Our intent is to do something with the home. I mean, that's.
I understand that was doing that last time too.
Yeah, well, we had COVID, I mean,
I
we
understand.
didn't anticipate anything. Even during COVID, I cut down all the old trees, started cleaning up, and then I did what I could do to the property. Earl, Robinson, I mean, he's cleaned it up.
I've done a lot of hard work over there, if they ain't know. The road is kept clean, all the old dead trees are cut down. We got it ready to go, but we gotta start somewhere.
So, I mean, the farm is in bad shape, there is a lot of stuff.
There's still more repairs to do.
We're cleaning it up, and part of these architects that we're working with, their real specialty is beautifying a piece of property with, plants and trees that are indigenous to the local area. And so we plan on really making something special there. It's gonna be different than any other facility in Kentucky. We want to have our own character, our own look and feel.
Any other questions? Beyond. Thank you all.
Thank you.
This being a public hearing, anyone like to speak in favor of this proposed?
Yes, sir, I do.
Go ahead, please. Go to
We
the
gotta start somewhere. Stand up,
And introduce.
Robert Earl Ross.
Thank you.
I live on 80 on Lancaster Road.
Thank you, sir.
I'm the man who opened the door to this camp, okay? I believe in this guy. I've been working for him. He does what he says. He's got a lot of good ideas. We've got to start somewhere. You know, we can't rebuild a house until we have a big house to start. You can't have a tour, you do everything. We got to start somewhere. I'm ready to start. I have people want to work, pay taxes, spend money. We all need to know how the tax situation is right now. Everything's been slowed down for over a year. We need to get rolling. I don't see nothing really bad negative about it. If that's me, you want to do it anyway. But I live there.
You got good intentions, more than we need. That's all I can say, and there's nothing I can say negative about it if I had it. You know, I just think it's a good idea overall. Like, there's gonna be something different, something special, on our business today, traffic, and money be spent for other business, stores, convenience stores, and jobs. You know, it's got to start somewhere. You know, it's got to start. That's the best thing I can say. I think.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor, please? Stand up, introduce yourself, or go to Mike, either one, please.
My name's Lillian Johnson. I am a local chef in the area. And I just wanted to say that I'm totally in favor of this because it opens up hospitality opportunities. And I couldn't think of a better Kentucky way of doing that. So, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor?
My name is John Albright, and I'm with Caldwell Stone. We're a judge and property owner. My comments aren't on behalf of EDP or ECIS, strictly the board. And we've had an opportunity to meet with Francesco a couple of times. We've had a chance to go out and see the stabilization of the grow house. And we've also had a chance to talk about rock fences. And one of the things that's important to the historic preservation of the area in the farm is the rock fences. And many years ago, when the rock fences were in pretty bad shape, the Josh Stone Conservancy, I think that license came in, and they redid all of the rock fences that across the Gallup country. And they ran out of material, and so we were able to go into our quarry and selectively blast and get some rock in certain measures that they could use to finish that project. We've had the conversation with them that we're willing to do the same thing again, if that's what it needs to be to provide the rock, that they'll need to do it at the appropriate time to rebuild the historic business. So I feel like there's interest in the restoration of the grow house is genuine, or in light of his comments and requests for us to assist in trying to rebuild. So that's what I just want to say. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor?
My name is George Cooper. I'm actually glad to see the development, and I appreciate your commitment. I think I heard a commitment this morning that the house was being restored. So I think we have a commitment that the house will be restored. Just want to remind everybody that this house was built 237 years ago in Virginia. It predates Kentucky statehood. It is a historically significant site that we're happy to have. And when you purchase a historically significant property, you become its caretaker and its steward, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. And I'm really glad to hear and understand that the house will be restored. And again, I think we heard a commitment, and maybe when we get to the phase of the site plan, that can be made as a condition, of the site plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for restoring the house.
Anyone else like to speak in favor? Hearing none, anyone like to speak in opposition? Hearing none, we'll consider this public hearing closed at this time. Chair now would recognize anyone to make a motion either to approve or not approve. Jim?
I make a motion to approve the proposed zoning amendment together with the conditions upon the general development plan conditions set forth for the applicant, based on the testimony and documents presented in the public hearing, the predominant public being in favor of it. Consistent with the 2017 comprehensive plan, this is demonstrated by the compliance. Following items is consistent with the future land use map, is consistent with the adopted goals and objectives. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Thank you. We have a motion. And Terry seconds. Question or discussion on the motion to approve as presented by Jim.
Yes, a question for the movement in the second, and just one small tweak on this. In the development conditions, do you agree as part of your motion have the removal of the words "for any single building, so that the total building square footage is 100,000 feet, not for one building?
Yes.
Thank you.
And second to that change, Terry, Phil? Okay, thank you. Questions in our discussion on the motion to approve as presented? Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. Item 2 on the public hearings, Jean Ann Daniel Hester filed an application to rezone property tract of land containing 3.260 acres located at 0 South Danville Bypass. Requested zone change from agriculture to highway business. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looks like we're getting warmed up here, so let's keep on rolling. Another zone change request. Again, application was filed on November 3rd, 2020. Kind of kind of stalled out due to our COVID meetings in November and December. And this applicant, Ms. Hester, I believe is here. Family members are here. This property is actually over on South Danville Bypass. It has a 0 address, which there's no structures on it. Easiest way to think about this, if you're not familiar, called the frontage road, but it's a glorified frontage driveway that's shared by all the property owners, where the skating rink is. And you start to head east, and you end up, Rexall's down there towards the end, and you end up in the church parking lot. This is the next property past that church. So it's the corner of Ghost Pike, kind of that corner in South Danville Bypass. It's a vacant tract. You see it's 3.260 acres, although we're zoning a smaller portion because it's partially already zoned highway business. It's zoned agriculture and highway business. The applicant's intention is to get this in one zoning classification to clean it up so it can be sold or potentially developed. Again, the current zoning is agriculture and highway business. The proposed zoning is highway business. And you can see on this page 1 of your staff report, the surrounding areas comprise some residential uses, some commercial uses, a couple industrial uses, and a whole bunch of vacant uses. And the future land use map designation is commercial for this entire property. So we'll turn to page 2 of your staff report. And again, Article 310.3E and Article 311.2 in the zoning ordinance require the submission of a general development plan, concept plan, or written narrative or combination thereof. And again, the applicants have kept this simple because the property is small and there's, again, not a lot of major issues, but their focus was that the property wasn't to be divided, how we would handle some frontage issues and some access issues. So they committed to all the things that their engineer and I think the city was hoping they would do with this if the property was attempted to be divided. But the goal is to sell the property in one configuration to somebody and work out their access agreement through a shared right-of-way by the easements already that gets to the property. So the conditions on the bottom of page 2 says the 3.26 acre parcel will not be subdivided until one of the following criteria occurs. A frontage road located west of the subject property is owned and maintained by the city of Danville. And that is a lofty thing. To get that into the city's inventory, it will take a coordinated effort between all those property owners. Basically, remove some parking, shift some road attributes around, and basically rebuild that entire street to the city standards before the city can take that over as a frontage road. That is a private, glorified driveway that runs there at the gap at the quality end, the skating rink all the way to the east. It's just a shared driveway. So to get that a city street, it would take a coordinated effort between all those property owners, maybe a financial effort. And the city's open to that, to bring it into the inventory, but it has to basically be platted, the city right away, completely developed under their standards before they can accept it into their inventory. But that's a criteria, because you never know, it's a never say never. But then B's kind of plan B. No new points of ingress egress are created along South Danville or Ghost Pike. So again, we're not subdividing the property until it's either city street, and we're not creating new access points. And then C says portions of the subject property are combined with the adjoining property. So there's a possibility, let's say the church bought the property, combined it. You know, again, they already get to that easement. And then the total commercial building square foot, again, a cap on what can be built out on the property is 50,000 square feet. So again, the property could be sold and developed under the highway business standards up to that threshold. If somehow it's to be divided, that eastern tract would have to get frontage somehow. So So it's probably unlikely, but it's possible. That's what the conditions address. Then you got an exhibit Advantage Engineering did. The concept plan's so hard to read on this format. Again, I apologize, we don't have a PowerPoint. That is kind of a combination of conditions and the concept plan, and they've got some notes in there about that access easement shared. And again, there is a 50-foot dedicated shared easement. It's not dedicated to the city of Danville as a public right of way. Comprehensive plan review starts at the bottom of page 3. A lot of this is going to sound repetitive from the first case, so I'll streamline a little further this time. Goals and objectives are what we look at, as well as comprehensive plan and future land use map and the development provisions. The goals and objectives that were relevant to this case were the general plan development goal and objective, the economic development, and the land use. Chapter 9, when we get into the future land use map chapter, again, talks about our development review provisions. Gives us clear guidance when we do commercial development on the bottom of page 4, top of page 5. You see the zoning map right there on page 5. It shows the split zoning of the parcel, half highway business and some agriculture. Future land use map compliance starts on page 5. Page 6 is our future land use map. You can see that weird looking pink color right there. That's commercial. So that whole strip all the way down to the corner of Ghost Pike, future land use map shows as commercial. And the applicants are asking for highway business, which is a commercial designation. And again, staff items of concern on page 7. There are no staff items of concern. Our typical findings, as they're spelled out in Paris 100-213, land on the bottom of page 7. And our cookie cutter motion, page 8. And I'm glad to answer any questions. The applicants are here, their engineers here, if you have any questions for them. And again, I'm glad to answer any questions about this zone change request at 0 South Danville Rocklands. Thank you.
Question for Steve. Hearing none, I'd like to hear from the owner, please. And or whomever. I think we know this.
I'm Jeannie Daniel-Mister, and I'm representing the owners of this piece of property. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
I'm Jeannie Daniel-Mister. I'm representing the owners of this property. And we're just requesting that we have one zone designation for this property instead of 2. And that seems to follow the comprehensive plan. So that request.
Does this property include that corner where the welcome to Danville sign is, or whatever? Right there at the corner of Gulf Viking. Right there.
I don't know.
You know, Danville?
I'm not familiar with where that sign is. I don't-
Right there on the corner, where you turn right on Old Stanford, come on straight to Danville.
It would be on our property.
Okay. I
It
just
would
curious.
be on the same driveway.
Could be on the right way. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Ms. Hester, could you speak just briefly to the compatibility of a business use with what's already there surrounding the property?
I'm not sure, say that again.
Could you just speak with whether you think a business use of the property, which is what you're proposing, is compatible with what your neighbors are using their properties for?
Well, as far as, we are not planning on developing a business. We are planning on trying to make it easier for someone else to come in and develop a business. There are, on the zoning map amendment request, it does say that it's with commercial, light industrial, and self-storage units is what they put down. So I would assume that that would be, whoever would want to buy it would need to follow those arrangements.
Anything else from the commissioner? Questions, please? Anything else? Kendall, anything you'd like to say?
No,
Introduce yourself, Kendall.
I'm Kendall Wise from Advantage Engineering, and again, it appears to be comprehensive plan. Adjacent properties are used as commercial property. You've got a church, you've got a distributor of electrical supplies, and on down the line. So it has limited uses, the property does, but commercial by far the most beneficial use for the property. Otherwise,
The audience like to speak in favor of this proposal? Hearing none, anyone like to speak in opposition? Hearing none, we will consider this public hearing closed.
Mr. Chairman, if we have a motion to approve, I would just suggest that the movement mention that the proposed zoning is consistent with the future land use map, and that the business, the highway business use would be compatible with surrounding commercial properties.
We have a motion to approve or disapprove.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditions on the general development plan conditions submitted by the applicant. Based on the testimony documents presented in the public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted 2017 comprehensive plan that demonstrated by its compliance with the policy. As you can see, it's within future land with each map, and we're looking at it there. And also consistent with the adopted code with the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan.
Have a motion, Jim, your second. Motion and second. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. Item 3, public hearing, Kentucky Lodging and Development Company Incorporated, taking away irrevocable trust, file future land use map amendment from low density residential to mixed use residential property located at 0 Quakertown Road, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, and probably, we've had a lot of things happen. If you remember, we were going to flip-flop the agenda, if that was okay. We have conflict with the third applicant. So what we're going to do is move number 5 and 6 up, and 3 and 4. They're similar cases. Yeah, this case will go about as quick as probably that prior one, and we want to, honestly, there's a lot of folks here, I think, for that case. We wanted to spend all the time we have left on kind of our rental agreement to do that. There's a conflict with that third one, it's the chairman, it's the board's call. If you guys want to stay with the agenda, I'm prepared to present either staff report. But these next 2 cases are connected, so there's 4 agenda items left, but there's combined staff reports that you'll see, and they're very similar in nature. And it's what you guys are doing. There's been a request to flip-flop the agenda and pull Mike Harris's cases into that 3rd and 4th slot, and move the other 2 down.
Commission prerogative here as listed on the agenda. Hearing no voice one way or the other, I say we continue as listed.
All right. So let me get my book here. All right, so you should have that staff report in front of you for Kentucky Lodging and Development Company Incorporated. I want to point out one thing at the very top of that staff report. It's different from the 2 you just heard. This is a combined staff report, but you have 2 formal applications in front of you. So there was a request to amend the future land use map, which is item number 3. And then there's an item number 4, which is the zone change request, kind of contingent on that first hearing or independent of however we get there. But both applications were filed, and we combined the staff report. It's kind of the same narrative, same goals and objectives are relevant. The development plan, the concept plan, all of those things sort of relate to both. So we made one staff report, and at the end of the staff report, there's actually 2 sets of motions. One up and down, one here. The way the hearing needs to flow, though, this is a hearing on the future land use map amendment. I'll run through all the staff reports, and at some point we get to a motion up or down. Once that's done, the next application will be called. If you go through the same stuff again, or at that point you guys should have more limited testimony, if you get that far, and there's a motion to approve on that. Might need a gap between case future land use and zone change, give an applicant an opportunity depending on the outcome, to decide what's going on with the zone change. And as you guys know, our zoning comprehensive plan allows these applications to be filed concurrently or independently. As you heard the distillery case earlier, they chose to file a future land use map separate, come back the next month, do the zone change. We've had applicants do it that way, we've had applicants do them together. So either option is allowed under our ordinance and our comprehensive plan and the state law. So this is a combined staff report, and I'll roll through this and I'll point out the items maybe that are more specific to the future land use map, and then identify the stuff that maybe is more consistent with the zone change. So page 1 of your staff report again says the applicant is Kentucky Lodging and Development Company Incorporated. The future land use map application was filed on November 4th, 2020. Again, it's kind of stalled out due to COVID. And then in January, they decided to file their application for the zone change just due to the time issue there. And then the case that we're going to hear next is very similar. It's a future land use map and zone change concurrent that were actually filed concurrently. But this was filed at 2 different filing deadlines and then combined here to that hearing this one. So again, applicants Kentucky Lodging and Development, property owners of Peggy Watt Cordell, Irrevocable Trust, I believe managed by a local bank. The location is 0 Shakertown Road. Property is 5 acres in size. And that's just for bearings, that's just north of the radio station right there. Just right across from Daniel Christian Academy, Caterpillar. It's the next property directly north of the radio station. There's a farm there, so it looks like one big property. But this 5 acres is really separate under this trust. It's all fenced as one, cattle running in it, but this 5 acre option is just that little corner right there next to the radio station property. The current future land use map is low density residential. This property is located within the city limits of Danville. This 5 acres is in the city, the rest of the farm is in Boyle County's jurisdiction. And that's relevant for a reason, and we'll tell you that in just a second to get your comprehensive plan. And again, the property size is 5 acres in size. Current plume low density. The proposed future land use map amendment is mixed use residential. Mixed use residential, as you know, allows the ability to do commercial, residential, office, or combination thereof. What the applicants are desiring to do basically is construct a retail store. We're dodging around what it is. All the elevations in your package show that it's a dollar store. There'll be a dollar store potentially constructed on the front part of the property on approximately 2 acres. And they really have no development plans for the rear. And they're going to mention that here. There may be some changes to the conditions. I want to point that out too. Just remember that. They submitted a brand new site plan at your seat. It's 11 by 17 area. The difference from what was in your packet, they flipped the building layout based on recommendation from the Kentucky Department of Transportation. So that's basically the same layout in the packet, just flipped and pushes the driveway closer to the radio station. They've also submitted a new set of development conditions at your desk. It should be stapled, 2 pages long. So again, they provide some development conditions, I think, to address some neighborhood issues, deal with that rear property, and make some commitments to kind of share some of the things that maybe were online and whatnot were said by the public. Another issue I guess I would bring up, there were several letters submitted. There was a couple articles in the paper and some hoopla on the web and stuff, but several neighbors called. Several neighbors are obviously here. A lot of people submitted letters that they wanted entered into the record. You guys have those in the packet. Some of those folks may want to be here and speak, but a lot of these people wanted to submit a letter, but they couldn't be here for various reasons. And as you guys know, that they're not here, but we gave them to you to review. I'm not going to read them, and they're entered into the official record at that point. And there's a separate one in there from an attorney that we got yesterday, and it's Mr. Grady, I believe. He submitted a letter, and he asked that it be read. But again, it's not our responsibility to read his letter into the record. It needs to be entered into the record, and you guys can read it, but I'm not going to read the letter verbatim to you guys. He couldn't be here today. His letter states why. He mentioned enough, he didn't say it's COVID or quarantine. He said he hadn't been vaccinated yet. So he has the luxury of picking and choosing, and he's going to attend meetings based on a vaccination schedule. I've got such a low group, I'm going to work until it's my turn to get vaccine. So he did not attend the hearing. He submitted a letter on his behalf that we don't really concur with, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And he wants it read into the record or entered into the record, and Henry will address that later today. So let's get back to the staff report. The zoning history on the property. Zoning is the original zoning for the property. Same there. The existing land use is residential and vacant. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one too. Changing the page. The existing land use is vacant. Sorry, it's farm. The surrounding area is comprised mostly of agricultural uses, residential and commercial uses in close proximity to this property. The future land use map designation currently is low density residential. Low density, as you all know, is pretty much subdivisions, single family homes. That is asking for mixed use residential. And as we get to the flume, I'm going to talk about more detail, but I will point out right now, one of the interesting challenges we have in this community is that future land use map. And as you all know, another item on our to-do list that's been kind of a COVID cancellation issue in mapping is to get this map fixed. And there's no better example of the inconsistency and the problem with our future land use map than this shot right here in the packet. You want to look on page 7. It's a perfect example of the problem we have with our future land use map. Commissioner Barrett's not here, but I've heard him say this. We've had some discussions about the map. We don't have a future land use map in Danville. We have an existing land use map. The history of the land use map, I can go through it, but there's parts of this community that map is exactly the same as 2007. It was never changed. And we have designations that are existing. So, for example, you see the radio station right there in pink. That's a commercial use. And its future land use is commercial. In a perfect world, if the desire was to have this all residential or commercial, the radio station, even though it's a commercial zoning or a commercial use, the future land use map would be something else. But our map is consistent all over the city with what's actual, not what we want. If you go down Houstonville Road, our future land use map is this little gap teeth looking thing, goes from single family, multi-family, commercial, single family, industrial. Future land use map should just be a swath of something. And then zoning is obviously something different. And existing is something different. So in 2007, when this map was drafted, it was existing. If you open our existing land use map and open future, it's identical, except for one area in this whole community. So when the comprehensive plan was revised, and whenever 11, 12, whatever, I'm going to point out there's some narrative put in this book that specifically said we want growth in this area. And there's an interesting sentence that says we shouldn't follow the map anywhere in Danville because of the problem with the map. And the narratives in this staff report I'm putting out. And then there's the map. And so the map wasn't touched. It was labeled 2017 by the Bluegrass ad, and it looks the same everywhere. But the 2168 corridor was obviously highly contested. You guys had several meetings about what should be on that corridor. And there were land uses on, land uses off, and ultimately this is what we ended up with. But going back to that picture right there on page 7, that radio station is there. It is a commercial use. And that's a future land use map designation. So the applicants are right north of that little triangle, that little square, say, hey, we want what they got next door. The school's across the road, for the life of me, I don't know why, it's labeled as public. The country club in Danville is labeled as public. I don't know, those aren't public entities, those aren't public structures. Those are commercial. That map shows they're public. We got low density, we got agriculture, we're not consistent in a generalized fashion as a comprehensive plan says it should be. We're parcel driven. This map's a disaster. It's something that we're going to do to fix it, and we're going to work on the draft of this. But as you know, we told you guys in kind of our work plan, we're going to start down the bypass because we've got a lot of things happening. And we're going to kind of do it in quadrants. Go Danville, 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 Danville. And then we got to get out and fix the county. And as you know, we spent a while getting Perryville done, Junction City done as quicker projects as a precursor to get Junction City back into the comprehensive plan. Right there's a perfect example. We got low density on one side of the street. Agriculture on the other, go south, right back to low density, go north, public, but it's commercial, go across the street, commercial, next, surrounded by low density. So the applicant's asking for mixed-use residential, which is consistent with the industrial, the commercial development they intend, if this is approved, move forward with the dollar store. And I'm going to point out some of those inconsistencies in the comprehensive plan. They're going to be a challenge for us as we move forward on any case. So, get back to the staff report. I apologize about that. I want to roll through this one because these points are all pretty important. Get back to page 3, goals and objectives. We always look at our goals and objectives in Article 1 to see what they say, what they guide us on. General land development, obviously we've heard that a few times already. Economic development would be relevant here. Housing, community facilities, turn to page, transportation, land use. The land use goals, interesting, we haven't read that earlier today, so we'll put that out there. One of those objectives say make efficient use of existing utility systems by promoting restoration, redevelopment, or infill development, and discouraging strict development. Minimize adverse effects of development by providing an adequate supply development plan to accommodate anticipated growth within an urban service area of each city. And then we get into chapter 9. Let's go to page 5. Now I'm going to take some time on this because I'm going to jump back about 3.5 years. So when I was interviewed for this position, and Chairman Lieber was in there and a couple of commissioners, they interviewed me and asked the questions you would imagine from my background. And I had studied up for the interview, was nervous, obviously, but read the conference plan, read the zoning ordinance, and I was confused about a few issues coming from a bigger city, bigger county. And I didn't understand some direction. And I asked a couple questions and kind of heard about the history of the conference plan. And then when I was hired and dug into it further, there were two things that just sort of jumped out at me. Number one, we had labeled an urban service boundary, almost an entire half of Boyle County. It went into Lincoln County. I said, how in the world would we have an urban service boundary in someone else's county? Most of the planning commissions in the state of Kentucky do not have urban service boundaries. They have development areas and zoning ordinances. Obviously, Fayette County is the big one that has an urban service boundary, which basically says, we grow in here, but we don't grow out here. And what I didn't understand is we had an urban service boundary that was the entire county and into another county. I said, is that where we're planning to grow? I said, I don't understand, there's no land use there. Why would you put an urban service boundary and leave it all agriculture? Well, it turns out that wasn't an urban service boundary, that was a utility service area, and at that time, Earl Coffey, being the city engineer, explained that to me. It's just mislabeled in the plan. We didn't have an urban service boundary, we had a utility boundary, but that's their jurisdiction. We put water and sewer, even down into Lincoln County, that's Junction. So as you guys know, we amended chapter 9 as a housekeeping exercise and fixed that in 18. And properly labeled that boundary. That's that dotted line on our map. It's a utility service boundary under Danville's jurisdiction. The issue number 2 was this map. And then it was this narrative right here on page 5. So this is the Danville future land use map narrative. It's supposed to go together with our map. This was written sometime 12, 13, 14 by our prior staff or administration before I got here. And it's curious language. Then you turn to look at the map. And I want to point some stuff out. So it says in Danville, when I talk about in the county, the growth that is anticipated in Danville will create a need for additional acreage for all urban land uses. And then there's a table, table 9-1. And it outlines residential, multifamily, and commercial. And it says how many acres we have. And then for some reason, a lot of planning commissions do no longer do this kind of analysis. It tries to project how many acres we need for the future. If we need more acres. And they put that in the plan. Most communities don't do this. It's hard to figure that out. It's speculative in nature. Uses need different amounts of land. Just like the client we heard earlier, that distillery is going to need way more land than maybe a 5,000 square foot industrial use that would be a body shop or something. But in our plan, point out 2 things. Residential, we had 2,138 acres in our map. But the yellow on our map was another 3,007 acres. Now I'm going to put that in perspective here. If you did 4 houses to an acre, which is just a typical R1A development, though we got so much low density on the map, that's 12,000 new homes that the 2017 plan said we need in the next 5 years. If 3 people lived in there, that's 36,000 people. We'd be bigger than Bowling Green right now. That is an absurd number. Commercial shows we have 803 acres. It says we need 583. I don't know where the 3 comes from. Exactly 583 more acres. That's a weird chart, especially when you look at the map. And I'll go down to that paragraph down there under residential. It says the city may be influenced by newer trends in residential development that result in smaller or mixed-use developments, such as condominiums, plain developments, and townhomes. That's accurate. If you turn to page 6 with an underline, this is a baffling sentence. And I apologize because I probably missed it when we amended chapter 9 because we didn't screw around with the data. We really need to strike this whole paragraph maybe and go back to the drawing board because the map is not accurate. So look at that last part of that paragraph on top. It says, as can be seen, much more land is designated on the future land map as residential use that is required during the planning period. So it's not there, so why do we put it in there? Because the 2007 map had 3,000 acres, and we didn't fix it in 2017 as a staff. Not planning commission's fault, staff didn't do it, so we left it yellow. So then look at this other paragraph that was sentence got written in the new plan. It says, thus, decisions to rezone should be based on the development review provisions discussed later, rather than on simple criteria that result requested that is compliance with the future land use map. That sentence says don't follow the map. We got so much residential on the map, there's no quick way to evaluate that. Look at every project, make sure if it makes sense, ignore the map. Why would we having, I'm going to finish and then we'll jump to you.
I just had a question.
Well, let me finish.
We're off topic here. We're having a this isn't a meeting for you to pontificate about the plan and lack of plan from the last 2 years. It's time to do this hearing. I don't know if you're doing time for the applicant to show.
I'm just reading line if that's what the commission wants. I'm reading what's in our current conference of plan.
But you wouldn't read the attorney's letter.
Do
Well,
you
they
have
have the documentation. They can read it at their discretion.
Okay,
You don't even want to.
I'm going to be done in just a second. So I just want to point out, our conference plan gives us guys to not follow the map on residential. And I'll read one sentence for commercial. The map shows 2168 is agriculture. This is directly related to a future land use map request in this area. The map shows it's agriculture low density. The comprehensive plan says that we need to grow in the, it says here, 2168 intersection, Highway 33, Highway 34. The comprehensive plan says that's where commercial land use should go. That's in the plan, and the map shows something different. And the attorney's letter, by the way, has nothing to do with our comprehensive plan or any element here today. It's a legal argument whether we can even have a public hearing today. There's nothing in this letter that you see that even debates the issue of the dollar store other than they argue we don't have a legal authority to have this meeting today. And I'll address that again. I won't get into future land use map language. On page 7, you guys have heard that twice already. But page 8 is important because when you apply for a future land use map, you have to make a decision what criteria you're going to ask or request on. If the applicant is requesting the third option, which says they think they can prove they're compatible with the general area. And that's got to be shown to you guys through the submission of their site development plan and their conditions. So you have a process here that outlines how we amend the future land use map through what's called a compatibility assessment. That's the applicant's burden. That's right there on page 8. Then the development review provisions are again similar to what you've seen in the prior two zone changes. And then on page 7 or page 9, again, these are development review. And by the way, going back to that prior paragraph, it says we're supposed to follow those more closely than follow the map. So that's really your guidance when we're reviewing this case is goals, objectives, development review provisions, and then the accuracy of the map. So all that language is relevant. Because it's something you have to consider. You guys have never done a case like this in this area. But there's, I guess, a general comments, and we got a lot of comments that someone decided there would be no growth in the north part of Danville. Yet the comprehensive plan that was spent 2, 3, 4, 5 years done has a sentence that says the opposite. And that is my job as staff. I'm going to point that out to you guys in this public hearing second. Get to page 10, we get to our general development review provisions, 310.3E, 311.2. The general development plan is required to be submitted with the zone change request and the flume. Again, the general development plan is really not the zone change, but you guys need to see the nuts and bolts of that to understand flume compatibility. So then we get to the applicant's development conditions on the bottom of page 10. And you should have a new set at your chair. And we're going to read through those. These were revised prior to the meeting. There's now 11. And these are actually what the applicant is offering up as reportable conditions for the property. And I'll read those right now. So number 1, the property will be limited to 1 Shakertown Road access point. 1 access point, Shakertown Road, no other access point. The location and configuration of said Shakertown access point will coordinate with the Planning Commission of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And again, the applicants heard there might be a problem with the access. They called KDOT yesterday. They told them to move the location, which you see on that exhibit. Number 2, the applicant, this looks new. I'm reading these first time as you guys are. They just handed them to me. The applicant agrees to a 2-year development moratorium on the westernmost portion of the parent property denoted as tract 2 on the exhibit. Final dimension of the acreage of the moratorium property will be defined in the development plan submitted after approval of the proposed zoning map amendment. 3 says applicant agrees that tract 1 to be limited to a single commercial site with 1 commercial building. So that obviously is the dollar store site. Upon submittal of the site development plan, any remaining land not allocated for commercial use will be subject to a 2-year development moratorium identified above. 3, again, it looks like it's building square footage. It says the applicant commits that the retail store footprint shall not exceed 13,500 square feet. The reason why that's 13,500, the dollar store layout you have on that exhibit is around 8,000, 8,500, something in that range. We'll let them talk about it. But they have offered up 2 alternative elevations. It should be in your sample report. One shows the brick dollar store. One shows kind of a barn look, pitched roof, maybe a hardy board. We'll let them talk about that. They're open to whatever version the community or the planning commission desire. So that square footage is 13.5 if they had to build that bigger kind of 2-story look. But their desire is to build a dollar store. A typical dollar store, as you guys know, is about 8,000 plus. These maybe be a little bigger. So that's why that square footage is kind of a tad bit bigger than what we typically see for a dollar store. Number 5, and I guess this is new after some stuff in the papers, the applicant agrees not to construct a street connecting the street with subdivision. It's never their intention. It's a stub street to serve that rear lot. It's potentially be subdivided in the future. There was never a plan to connect the street on any exhibit we were submitted. It was just a quote in the paper that got retracted by the paper fixed, but there was never a connection to street. And now 5 makes that a formal commitment. 6 deals with underground utility lines connected to sewer. 7 deals with full kind of subdivision regulations. 8 is what you saw before, that all buildings will be at least 50% brick, stone, hardy board, masonry, drive it, or combination. The lots that face the road will be 75% of that higher quality. So again, no vinyl sided buildings, no metal sided buildings. If a building's built, it's going to be brick, stone, hardy, drive it, combination. And again, you've got 2 exhibits that you're seeing. 9 deals with the landscape buffer. We already had that in place. 20-foot wide landscape buffer to the eastern property line. That's double what our requirement is. That would be the road frontage. They're committed to a double width landscape buffer. Our buffer width is 10. And then they're committing to 20 feet on the southern side, which is the radio station side, a 20-foot buffer on that side, and they committed to keep any existing trees or of a significant caliber to stay in place and supplement the buffer we'll have to construct. 10 says they agree to a monument sign, no pole sign, it would have to be a ground level type monument sign. And then 11 says, again, this is just kind of legislating out what could go in general business. They're saying no adult entertainment, no repair, vehicles, alcohol sales, etc. So that's their new set of development conditions that they brought this morning to substitute the set that was filed with their application. And with that, we need to finish up the staff reports. So page 11, you have your site layout. There's the brick elevation at the bottom of page 11. Not sure how many in Bardstown or another community, but that's a two-tone brick dollar store. It appears to be two-story. Some kind of more decorative lighting, monument sign, concrete driveway. That's kind of elevation number 1. Turn to page 12, 13. You see this other dollar store. Looks like a Hardy mix, maybe. Decorative kind of pitched roof, lighting. And they're offering that as option number 2. And I believe when they get up there, they're going to ask you guys, if this is moving in that direction, what do you feel is a more appropriate design on an architectural basis? So again, page 11, we get into just summarizing the applicants are asking for a low density to mixed use future land use map request. Whatever happens with that up or down, there's a zone change request behind it. They would be moving forward to go from agriculture to business. Staff items of concern on page 14, and you've heard most of these. Project compatibility is a requirement. Access, we wrote that before, they met with KDOT. That's a concern. And then it's clearly this damn flume designation versus land use policy directive is a concern for the staff. And with that, I'll just jump into the letter that you have from Mr. Grady. I know him, and it's an interesting letter. It's worded in the way that basically says he feels, he's an attorney, I'm not, he feels under the state law, planning commissions can't amend a future land use map. Unless, I don't know what he thinks, but it's an absurd, in my opinion. Communities do this all over the state. And we have a process to do it. So his argument is, you can't amend a future land use map under the KRS. Well, what's interesting about this, it's a typical kind of, in my opinion, you know, it's a typical cease and desist like you get when someone's building a fence next to you and start threatening each other. He makes his argument that we disagree with 100%. 100%. We'll let Henry address that. It's a legal opinion from one individual that was hired, I guess, retained by Gold Smart Growth. And what's interesting about the letter, and I'll point this out and stop. If he thought this was not a permissible hearing, or we couldn't do this under state law, you would think the letter would end with, we think you should table the hearing, or withdraw the application, or take it off the agenda, let our attorneys talk, and let's figure this out. But what the letter ends with, based on his findings, he wants you to vote no. So isn't it curious that the attorney wants you all to take some action after he's told you can't have the hearing? He concludes with, therefore you need to vote no. Well, we clearly know what that is about. He needs you all to take action. He wants the letter into the record so that when this gets off to some other place in court, he's got his information in there, and this becomes a legal challenge, just like happens in counties around us that he's involved in. If he was serious about that finding, he would have A, been here, and B, he would suggest we table this, or withdraw. So I'll pose that to the applicant. Their attorney's got the letter, our attorney's got the letter. If we are suspect here, with way we amend our future land use map, we conduct zone change hearings under the statute, which has been done for a long time, then maybe the applicant needs to consider their request for approval. But this idea that that's my opinion, now we want you to vote no, that's just a legal track record. We know what that is. And I'm going to be blunt about that. And if that was a concern that maybe we should stop and talk about it. I don't agree with it. I'll let Henry take it from there at the appropriate time and what his position on it is. The attorneys for all sides have this letter, and they can comment on it. I'm just a planner. But I think it's curious that that's the approach today, is I couldn't be here because I don't have a vaccine, and I think you guys aren't having a legal hearing in the KRS. I disagree with that. So I'm going to turn it to Henry and then give it to the applicant. And again, the next case is very similar to this. All the stuff's almost identical. We have a huge land use map and zone change request that generally is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Henry?
Mr. Chairman, the planning commissioners all had copies of this letter. That's what Mr. Bradley requested of me. You've received it. You can see what he asked for, and I'll summarize. He wrote this letter on behalf of a member of the public. I believe is here today, and she's at liberty to add if I miss anything important that's in the letter. The crux of this article is that the land use map is part of the comprehensive plan. The statutes provide certain requirements.
We can't hear. We can't hear. Speak up.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
There you go.
Okay. What I stated was that the commissioners have the letter. If the Mr. Baddy client wants to add anything from the letter that I missed, she's free to do so. The letter in brief states that the land use map is part of the comprehensive plan, and Kentucky statutes set out certain requirements for amending the comprehensive plan. I would suggest that we may, depending on the applicant's presentation, meet those requirements today because we'll deal with some of the research things that the statutes ask us to address, population characteristics, an economic survey of other businesses in the area, what the land use needs of the county are. If we hear that testimony today from the applicant, then we will have met what KRS asks for amending the comprehensive plan. Furthermore, the statutes say that if the planning commission determines that the research that was the basis for the comprehensive plan is still good, then we don't need to go through a full review of the research for this. It's my suggestion today, this is a novel process, amending the future land use map. It's novel to me anyway. Planning commission may want to consider its functionality with the kind of challenge we've had to today going forward. But as for the case law that's presented in the letter, nothing about it causes me to caution you not to hear this application today.
Now let's hear, we'll hear from the applicant, please.
Can everybody hear me now?
No.
Turn it on. There you go.
Is this a little bit better?
Yeah.
Perfect. My name is Justin Manning, I'm the attorney here for the applicant, and just a lot's already been said, so I'll try and move quick and not take up everybody's time. And as has been made clear, not only in addition to our application for the preliminary amendment, but I think some of my students, everybody here knows that we're focusing on the future amendment as well as the So my presentation is essentially almost for both applications at the same time, just so that I don't have to get up here and say everything again and take another further. Kentucky Lodging Development Company is a Kentucky corporation, and alongside the property owners that take these lots all the irrevocable trust. I filed 2 applications pertaining to this liability tract located on Chickertown Road. It's parcel number 045-000-103. Both applications are filed in compliance with the Danville zoning ordinances, and the first application requests an amendment to affect future land use map and to change the property designation from low-density residential to mixed-use residential. The main reason behind this request is so that the property's bloom designation is more appropriately fits and complies with the goals and objectives of the comp plan. And then the second application is to amend the official zoning map of Danville County. And this supplementary request asks that the property's current zoning designation be changed from agricultural to general business. This request is also consistent with the bloom and additionally consistent with and effectuates the goals and objectives of the comp plan. I was presented with that letter that this attorney submitted in regards to the bloom amendment, indicating that it has to go through the same research requirements of the comp plan, and to address that real quick, it was maybe a little bit boring for the public, so this is more for you to read that amendment of the bloom does not require the same research requirements as the adoption of the comp plan. I was familiar with this 1974 case before today. I researched this on my own when I heard in Danville, County, that In 2006, the Kentucky Court of Appeals disagreed with this ordinance based on a comp plan much more similar to the comp plan we are doing today. The 1974 case dealt with a comp plan that only allowed 2 zoning designations, residential or agricultural. Any other use had to be approved through a conditional use permit. As we're all aware, that's not the situation we're in today. In the 2006 case, that essentially objected to the 1974 case argument. There were multiple different zoning ordinances that could be applied for, as well as they indicated that you can't just look at the land use elements of the comp plan individually, you have to look at the comp plan as a whole. So the comp plan here has many elements to review and scrutinize outside of just the limits of the land use element. The current comp plan sets forth essential policies and procedures specific to all different parts of development. Plus, in the 1974 case, it essentially vested the Planning Commission and or the City Commissioners with an arbitrary power to amend the future land use map at will. In our case, that is not the situation. The comp plan specifically spells out review standards for amending the plume, and therefore we are acting in accordance with the comp plan. Since our current comp plan outlines procedures within itself as to how to amend the plume, these amendments are allowed and do not have to go through the same research requirements as the initial adoption. This is because they already have when they were approved as part of the comp plan. Also, we brought an amendment to the plume out of abundance of caution. We heard that was more the practice and preferred method here in Danville and Boyle County, so that's the right one. We are actually of the opinion that even if we don't have to amend the plume, we can still comply with the comp plan to satisfy the reason request. The comp plan itself states that the protocol for amending the plume is recommended. It doesn't indicate that it's mandatory. The only spot where the comp plan indicates that amending the plume is mandatory is in cases where a proposed development is clearly inconsistent with the plume and or other provisions of the comp plan, at which point the rezone shall not be granted unless and until it is amended. As I'll get to and start to explain, our request is not clearly inconsistent with the comp plan, the goals, the objectives, etc. Now, lastly, the comp plan element would be subordinate to the requirements of KRS 113 as clearly indicated, dictating what must be shown to approve the zone change. And so if we satisfy those, even without an amendment to the plume, we can still approve the zone change. So with that in mind, let's talk about the comp plan. All right. That's not enough again. All right. You want me to rehash all those plume? I'm sorry. So, just in general, and I know it's been discussed already, the Commonwealth of Kentucky has identified the comp plan as the keystone of the planning and zoning process. The comp plan must be regarded as a basic scheme, generally outlining plans and zoning objectives in an extensive area. A significant amount of research and analysis goes into the drafting of the comp plan. A short list of analyzed factors in drafting the comp plan include current population distributions, future population trends, economic surveys, economic development, needs of the community, among many other factors. Therefore, the Planning Commission should view the comp plan as a general guideline when considering plume and or zone change requests. Further, the Planning Commission should give great weight to any request that substantially conforms with the comp plan. Our property is 5-acre tract is within the Danville city limits. It's also within the district utility service boundary, as Steve indicated. The comp plan specifically identifies the majority of residents of Boyle County who depend on commercial development within the Danville city limits. While the comp plan doesn't indicate that the population is expected to grow fast in Boyle County or Danville, it does indicate that migration of the current population has become a more important factor in population projections. That's actually specifically on page 11. The state's migration has become a more important factor in population projections due to the expected, essentially, I think as Steve indicated, it's only a 0.2% expected change in population. current landscape and accounting for current approved plats and expected applications for future development around our property, you will find that the location of our proposal is right in the heart of an area that has seen the following migration and expected migration over the last 5 to 6 years and is continuing. Colonial Heights has grown rapidly recently with an expected 50+ lots to be applied during development. Candlewood has approximately 23 lots already platted and approved, with building expected thereon to start in the next 3 months. Approximately 70 lots are expected to be developed in the estates of St. James, just south of our location. Hunt Farm has already developed 55 lots that are built upon. Hunt Farm also has an additional 27 lots already platted and approved, with building expected thereon to start in the next 3 months. And Hunt Farm has space for an approximate 75 lots to be applied for and developed as residential housing. All of these figures were provided by a local developer here. The subject property is located right in the heart of this migration area, which means it is perfectly suited for a small commercial development to serve the needs of all of these expected new residents. As part of our application, there is a development plan for a new Dollar General store facing Shakertown Road, which is supplied using the van. The proposed Dollar General will carry a variety of everyday needs in the city, from laundry detergent, other cleaning supplies, food items, possibly in a small grocery store. Dollar General is already under their due diligence and market this area as a prime area for development and an area that the needs are planned at. So far, the Dollar General has proposed, and you've got copies of, we're willing to agree to certain conditions to not have a sign 30 feet up in the air, large yellow sign that would be on the ground. It would be at least 75% made of that brick, stone, grounded, hardwood. And the goal of that is that the Dollar General store is no longer just dollar items. I mean, this Dollar General store will be geared towards middle and upper middle class and those needs. While some may fear that allowing the property to develop as a commercial use, essentially a slippery slope to more commercial development in this area, please be aware that once again, the comprehensive does not identify strong surges in population. Therefore, a likely commercial boom in this area is unlikely, since it's already earmarked for most of residential. Further, our property is completely different from almost all of its surrounding properties. It's within the city limits, to the north is the county, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but without future regulations from the comp plan, the county is already earmarked as having a higher burden to be met for any commercial development to be allowed. In the city limits, commercial is encouraged. And the comp plan specifically speaks to the fact that residential growth is to be expected to encourage in and around between the PCH and intersection. The comp plan specifically states that the most notable changes of agricultural land use have occurred within the development of residential subdivisions, especially along the listed view, and then it further incorporates and identifies Kentucky 33. More importantly, in order to correct our situation, suburban residential development is currently illegal in several areas. This includes northeast along Lexington Road, south towards Jefferson City, northwest near Kentucky 3366 and US 127, and north along Kentucky 33. The majority of the land suitable for residential uses within the Danville city limits has been developed, although many tracts currently zoned agricultural or vacant have the potential for residential development. Existing Danville residential neighborhoods appear to be stable. The identification of these areas for significant likely residential growth indicates a very strong need for a local general store, and also further indicates an unlikely chance of slippery slope being created of commercial zoning in and around this area. The planning commissioners should not deny a zoning request that conforms to the comp plan based off of what may or may not discourage the surrounding properties. Speculative opinions regarding other properties' intentions should have little or no bearing on the planning commission's decision. Any opinion that approving our request today creates a slippery slope for each of the commercial areas cannot be confidently relied on when the surrounding region is largely earmarked from low density residential. To the contrary, as already identified, the planning commission should rely on the real justify the need for a local general store. There is a large difference between undesired development and unnecessary development. While some members of the public may express an opinion that Kentucky Lodging's proposal is undesirable, we have clearly indicated not to continue to clearly indicate that our proposal is needed. North Danville and North Florida County are growing at a rapid rate, and currently there is no good general store within a reasonable distance to accommodate the needs of this region. Additionally, the property owners of Kentucky Lodging would likely support future residential proposals, and that would only increase the clientele base for their store. Lastly, the comp plan specifically identifies that local general stores / convenience stores, similar to what Kentucky Lodging is proposing, are to be treated differently than other commercial enterprises. Specifically, the comp plan states that existing general store type commercial facilities in rural areas should be allowed to continue. The comp plan specifically identifies that general stores are a commercial enterprise and can and should be treated differently. So even if this property is located outside the city limits, it would still be appropriate in such a largely residential region of the county. The comp plan identifies both Kentucky 33 and Kentucky 2168 as regional roads. This means that they are intended to augment and interconnect with the regional arterial roads and provide service strips of moderate length. Further, there are state highways that currently generate immediate and high volume of traffic experience and will access all property and satisfy the needs. Due to these characteristics, these roads are best suited for general business development as opposed to residential, at least in regards to property that directly abuts the road. No residential housing refers to directly above the state highway that generates high traffic. Further, the comp plan identifies a proposed future road that would completely encompass the Kentucky 2168 and Kentucky 33 intersection. This proposed road would be a future rural collector road. As defined in the comp plan, this means that proposed road is expected to be used for penetrating neighborhoods and distributing trips from arterial roads to large collector roads to an ultimate destination. So if anybody's complaining about possible connection to a neighborhood or anything like that, first off, we're agreeing not to connect directly to any subdivision or including streaming. Plus, this comp plan was enacted and approved and adopted in 2017, and in the comp plan, it already has a proposed collector road that goes entirely around the 33 intersection. I've got to print out that figure from the comp plan, and we'll distribute that. But you can't say that you didn't know this was coming when it's planned for and agreed to already. And if we want to talk about future land use, the purpose of the future land use section is to provide the planning commission with a proper and detailed guide in its town land use decisions. This fact cannot be forgotten when reviewing our proposals. The comp plan identifies the future residential land in Danville may be inclined to be developed as an excuse, which is exactly what we are requesting of when we move into. Mixed-use residential development is a good thing for the city as it typically requires less land for development. Current residency regulations require certain minimum acreage for lots, and allowing mixed-use residential for properties that lie directly along arterial roads allows for agricultural properties in this region to more easily realize gain on their property values. For example, if agricultural land is consistently denied from being allowed to develop for other uses, the stringent requirements of low-density residential development remain high, which decrease the ability to gain profit from development. This means that agricultural farms will have a hard time realizing gain. Supporting and approving our request today indicates that agricultural landowners in the county and city, but the planning commission and the comp plan wants to be able to realize gain on their property. The comp plan specifically states much more land is designated on the future land use map as residential than is required. Kentucky Lodging is not asking for a large acreage amount to be designated as mixed-use residential. We're only asking for 5 acres that's directly adjacent to another commercial property and also butts the state highway. Of that, as agreed to in our proposed in our conditions, it's an approximate 1.5 acre lot that Dollar General would be on. The rear would be agreed to the 2-year development moratorium. The goal behind that moratorium being, let's see how the rest of this area develops. Maybe it would be found to be some sort of other residential development. Maybe it would be found for some sort of other commercial development. But should be based off the development review provision identified in the comp plan, rather than the simple criteria that the request is in agreement with the future land use map. This is a further indication that whether or not the plume is amended, a zone change request can be approved. This suggestion by the comp plan is not insignificant. It shows that the comp plan recognizes the inherent limitations of the future land use map, and therefore other procedures are necessary to allow for proper plan. For example, the future land use map is only a snapshot, stagnant in time. It is not a limited breathing mechanism that goes alongside the city county as service. Therefore, other procedures are already in place for changes within the comp plan, since the comp plan is only been delivered a few years for possibility. Immediately after identifying that more land than is needed is designated residential, the comp plan states additional land will also be required for the development of commercial uses. The comp plan then states, and this is very significant, that the areas designated for future commercial development are concentrated in the south end of Zanesville, along US 127, at the west end of Zanesville, at the US 150 and US 127 bypass intersection, and could be considered in the northeast quadrant of the city around the Kentucky 2168 intersection with Kentucky 33. It is recommended that land for the expansion of commercial uses be available in all sections of the Zanesville urban area. As already explained, the properties within the municipal utility service boundary within city limits and is a prime spot for local general store. The comp plan even goes so far to identify a proposal similar to ours today should be encouraged in planned locations which are convenient for residential developments. And that's actually a specific, I want to quote this from the comp plan that says, neighborhood commercial facilities such as small convenience grocery stores should be encouraged in planned locations which are convenient to residential neighborhoods. That's directly in the comp plan. The Planning Commission has already allowed the Naval Christian Academy to be developed across Kentucky 33. While it's considered a public use of seed pointed out to also confuse me, it is inherently a commercial enterprise. Directly south of the property is a radio station, which is also a commercial enterprise. Therefore, our request maps the surrounding properties and do not conflict with respective uses in this area. These commercial enterprises also indicate that the Planning Commission has already envisioned this area as having a growing need for further commercial development to support and complement the largely residential region. We're not asking to put in a strip mall or a tattoo parlor or anything like that. This is just our general store. And we already see the potential and the need for that local general store. And our request complements and is compatible with the surrounding properties. While the comp plan has identified the intersection of Kentucky 2168 and Kentucky 33 as sites for possible commercial development, approval of the Naval Christian Academy has allowed the large portion of this region to go to the commercial enterprise that is on pursuit of the property taxes. Allowing the development of the local general store will allow for an increase in property tax revenue and increase in income tax revenue and other business tax revenue. It will create a small number of jobs for the community. It will significantly enhance any future proposed trail and possible trail there on the west side of Kentucky 33. I know that proposed trails to extend west up right now to Kentucky 33 is many costs, significant costs to see without the possibility of a trailhead there. Once again, we're earmarking, willing to earmark the rear of our 5-acre tract with the development moratorium to see how things develop. So it is possible, whether it's residential, commercial, maybe a public park, we're open to this cost when the time is yes. The comp plan identifies in Rural County the increasing amount of land that is being subdivided as small as 1 acre with currently over 1 billion definitions. And the comp plan recognizes that this is an inefficient use of land and goes on to further identify some solutions to this issue. What is important in the comp plan is this preliminary, but the comp plan specifically identifies that increasing the minimum lot size for an AR1 zoning designation is more difficult for owners of agricultural land to realize a gain on the sale of This means that the traders of comp plan, or including the planning commission, have a strong desire for owners of agricultural land to be able to realize gain on their land. Approving our proposal easily sets the precedent indicating the planning commission's willingness to take traders' desire. The comp plan specifically identifies that if the land within the plan and the future land use policy plan is not updated and expanded regularly as the community expands, the cost of land within the area will increase disproportionately, thus jeopardizing housing affordability and rural. This means that commercial development is not allowed in certain regions of the county or the city, and housing around Danville is disproportionately affected in all future planning decisions as well. Growth in the city and county should remain equal proportions in and around Danville throughout the county, and the location of the property is the most logical area for a new local general store to meet the needs of the expected and currently occurring residential boom in the future. The purpose of the future land use map is to fit, in generalized fashion, the desired and expected future land use pattern. It must be stressed that the future land use map should not replace your all's discretion of the planning commission. Your ability to think analytically should not and is not boil down to whether a particular piece of property matches a color on the map. Instead, as identified in the comp plan, the future land use map does not attempt to represent future land use at the scale of individual properties. Instead, the future land use map represents a predominant land use which currently exists and which is expected to remain stable. This means that any perceived deficiencies of the future land use map to account for mixed-use residential and or commercial use of the property only means that this use is not yet anticipated in 2017, not that it's forbidden. Quite contrary, comp plan builds within itself procedures to amend the future land use map and or to avoid future land use map altogether as the city and county growth develops naturally. We've already indicated the large amount of residential growth both current and planned for this region that has occurred since the adoption of the current comp plan. It's important to also note that according to the comp plan, our property currently has 3 designations. It's currently zoned agricultural. The current land use map indicates our property is vacant, so our property is currently being used for any significant agricultural purpose. It's just a small 5-acre parcel on the corner of a much larger farm. And as a separate tract, it's not profitable to run on 5 acres, and basically would always have to be controlled somewhere on the farm. And lastly, the property is large on the future land use map for both in the residential. These are all important distinctive traits of our property. Since the property is only 5 acres and its current land use is considered to be vacant, amending the future land use map and including our zoning request is not taking away any significant agricultural property. Our opinion is that since the comp plan marks the property as vacant, it simply has yet to be decided by the planning commission which direction any future building of this property should go. Which leads to the zoning commission on whether it's residential. This doesn't have inappropriate for 2 reasons. First, the property is only 5 acres and located directly adjacent to commercial enterprise or radio station, directly across from the Danville Christian Academy and other commercial enterprise, and directly on the 33 on 5 acres is long and distinct. It's not alongside the 33, it's just a straight track. That layout would be hard to support anything other than maybe one possible single-family residential unit. A low-density residential designation indicates that the property is only designated for single-family development, with the density ranging from 1 dwelling per acre to 5 dwellings per acre. However, trying to fit 5 dwellings per acre on this, the way our current 5 acres is shaped, would obviously be very awkward. You have to have one access point for a lot of traffic coming off, pick up your 33, or you would inevitably need an access point coming out of another neighborhood. That's not what we want. That's not the goal of this presentation, and that's why the mixed-use development is more appropriate. Changing the future land use map designation to mixed-use residential allows the property more flexibility to achieve its full and best use in the county for the community. In a mixed-use residential area, the property can be utilized as a variety of development sites. Our current proposal is to
our conditions, and due to the unknown nature of much larger yet to be developed properties around this region, we're willing to agree to that 2-year development moratorium on any remaining property not used for the proposed commercial structure on the 1.5-acre tract directly adjacent to section 33. This will allow for other properties in this area to develop naturally, and then the remaining acres of our property would have to seek further planning commission approval for future uses. The current zoning designation for the property is agricultural, yet as discussed, the current land use is actually vacant. The property was likely grandfathered into an agricultural zoning designation, and there has never been any clear evaluated as to whether this is a fit and speaks for the fact. Once again, the property's location is unique, and that directly south of it is a commercial enterprise. Further, the city limits actually wrap around and through our property, meaning that the western and northern boundaries remain county property. Our property were forced to remain in the current designations and likely wouldn't develop at all, as it would be impractical to try to develop this shape of a 5-acre lot to station. Further, if consolidated with other residentially marked property to the south, we would still require some upward street access or access points to ride around the radio station. Rezoning this property to general business allows us to use for any commercial enterprise and serve the entire community region. This is actually the intention of our art with the development of the general store. It would serve the interest of the community of the region firmly and should continue further towards the jurisdiction. And so while public concerns should absolutely be listened to and addressed, our plan was legislatively created with a higher and greater purpose in mind. That purpose is to provide orderly, compatible development to support the entire city and county. Our proposal to accomplish this goal in the 1 year. Plus, paragraph 113 states that before any amendment is made, the planning commission or the legislative body or fiscal court must find an amendment in agreement to the adopted comprehensive plan. As I've already identified and explained, we feel our request is substantially in agreement with the comprehensive, and therefore will have the authority to grant our request today. To put it succinctly, for all of these reasons, we request that you will approve all of our applications today. At this point, I'd like to take any questions you want on what the reserve of the design or rebuttal on, because it's looking like it's going to have a lot of time.
Questions? Anything, Henry? Can we repeat it?
Justin, could you speak briefly to whether the proposed use will exceed capacities of infrastructure or public services?
Sorry, Gary, did you restate that?
Will the proposed use, will the dollar store exceed capacities of infrastructure or public services?
No, that's good.
Commissioners, questions?
I have a question on condition, development condition number 2.
Yeah.
You don't know what you want to do with tract 2. I'm sorry?
The question so far is,
Yeah, on development conditions number 2, you say you don't know what you want to do with track number 2 yet. Is that correct?
we're just willing to agree to the 2-year development moratorium.
So you don't have any plans for it at this point?
At this point, no.
Okay, so why do you need it zoned before you develop the plans?
Well, the 5-acre tract would be zoned concurrently, and within a mixed-use designation on the future land use map, you can actually have specific zones designated therein.
I know, but you've got 3 acres that you're not wanting to do anything with yet. Why do you want it zoned?
We want to develop the Dollar General store.
That's on a separate 2-acre lot, correct?
If the plat development plan would be approved, it would be a separate 1.5-acre tract. As of right now, it's an entire 5-acre tract, so it would be for that.
I know, but why can't you just divide it up like you've got it divided up? If you want the Dollar General store zoned one way, and this other piece of land is only residential or whatever it is, why do you need it zoned? You don't have any plans for it?
Okay, I'm following you correctly. You would rather us move for a rezoning of just the 1.5-acre tract for the Dollar General store and just not touch the remaining acreage.
I I'm looking for a reason to touch the remaining acres. I don't see it in your plans.
Okay, well, the reasoning is that that would leave a separate tract that is likely unconforming and incompatible to be used for any good use of a remaining 3-acre tract that has no access and is not touching or good development land at this point.
Again, if you don't have any plans, wait till your plans are developed and then ask for a zoning.
I'm Will Stevens. I'm with Age Engineering. I'm the engineer for technological development. And I just want to speak to that as the engineering surveyor. The tract currently exists as a 5-acre tract. That's been defined and platted. We do not own that tract. We have a contract to purchase the tract contingent upon the zone change, the submittal of a development plan at a later time, fleshes all this out. We're not at liberty to divide this tract at this time. Further, our plans for the Dollar Store are not finalized. We intend to build a 9,100 square foot store at this time. However, as you noted in the conditions, we are asking for up to 13,000 square foot or 13,500 square foot space. The reason for that is the Dollar General has several different prototypes that they allow for. Basically, the larger the store, the more grocery items you have. They've recently reintroduced a grocery concept. 13,000 square foot would allow for what you would see as small grocery. We intend to ask Dollar General after these proceedings today, if we are successful, we intend to ask them to review what exactly it is they want. They know that it will support a 900 square foot store, but we feel like it's possible that they may want to go with the larger grocery concept. If we today zone a very specific 1.5 acre tract commercial, we would be extremely limited and probably kept from expanding our footprint to that 13,000 square foot area. What we have laid out on the conceptual plan would be the 9,100 square foot store. So the exact space needed for the Dollar General tract is not finalized. And it will be finalized whenever we come back with our development plan, which will also bring you a minor plat that divides the property. We don't intend any kind of defensive uses for the property. But we felt like this was the most suitable path to take it whenever we consider that.
Other questions? One of the things you mentioned was that the entire 5 acres are in city limits, and I thought he said maybe not so. Is that correct or not?
I said it was in the city limits, and the rest of the property to the north is in the county.
So the entire 5 acres is in the city limits?
The last piece to the north.
Okay, thank you. What's the difference, distance to other stores at this point from that location?
I don't know the exact distance.
I can answer
in
that.
the general stores,
We can
but
speak.
there is
Park.
Page 29.
So we know Brook Cove is down the road, it's a gas station, convenience store, that's within a mile. The nearest Dollar General store would be on Main Street, and that's going to be 2 to 3 miles, maybe probably 3 miles, I would say, back to town. Then you got the Dollar General store in Berlin, that's probably 6 or 7 miles. Dollar General is not a Walmart concept. They're not trying to serve the whole town. They're trying to place themselves in convenient places. The whole idea is that it provides something that provides a greater level of service than, say, a gas station, without someone having to traipse across town. You're reducing, car trips, basically. It's intended to serve a small area.
Any other questions from the commission? Hearing none, sir, is there anything else?
not at this point, no.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience like to speak in favor of this request? Please come to the mic and introduce yourself.
I'm Ken Wise from Managed Engineering, and obviously I'm associated with this project. I'm working on it at the same time, resident of Fort County. And I live on Faulkner Lane, and this project will be a benefit to me and my family as far as
Can't hear you.
So the store, once it's constructed, will benefit myself and my family. We live on Faulkner Lane, and it will provide a shortcut or a closer and more convenient place to find essential goods and services, or essential goods. I've heard a lot of good things said about our project here, and we've already hit on most of the points. I just want you to understand that when you look at Danville as a whole, and you look at where the infrastructure is, the infrastructure that's needed to support growth and development, it's all located in this area. The trunk sewer for Spear Street, it runs from all the way over to Danville Manor, but it runs from Maple Avenue through Strickland and then on to the Spear Street pump station. And that whole area is undeveloped other than the street. The roads are obviously there and the water system's there. So you have all of the infrastructure needed to support the growth. And I think it's short-sighted. I think we saw some of it with that first plat this morning. Whenever we're creating residential homes out in the county, increasing the cost of what it takes to maintain those roads, what it takes to provide sewer service or water and sewer service to those people in the county. It's just an unnecessary burden whenever we could be properly planning for growth in the city limits rather than allowing it to occur out there. And that's aside from the retail store and the acceptability of that. But I want to just reemphasize that the infrastructure for growth is available here in this area. And one other thing that I thought was interesting, there's a lot of people here today. The Peggy, this property has a different title than the farm around it, which is called a farm. And I was just curious to know if anyone from that family is here in attendance today. Need to call up. That's, if anyone has a say in what's going to happen on the property adjacent to yours, they own several hundred acres there. And it's all in that same sewer shed. And will be developed someday. And, this happens to have a different title, so it's being sold at a different time than the rest of that farm would. But, if you want to control what someone does with their property, it's easy to say and do, but everyone has the same opportunity to buy these properties. And I'll just say that, this is the first step, and you better be saving up some money if you want to prevent growth from happening out there, because it's all going to become available for sale soon. If they don't care enough to show up with a meeting about what's going on here, they're not farming it, they're leasing it. So it's just a matter of time before it's for sale. And I can very easily create 1 acre lots to put residential homes on. It's a survey. I can come in next month, create a plat for 4 homes on this side, be approved, and nothing to be done about it. So just some things to think about. I support the project.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor? Have something new?
I would like to know how many dollar stores do we need in Danville? And where we
Ma'am, come to the mic, introduce yourself. If you're speaking in favor of, we need to hear what you have to say. If you're not speaking in favor, we'll get to you in a minute.
Well, I'm not in favor
Well,
of
then, wait till we get to you, okay? It's a simple process. We'll give you a chance.
like to speak in favor? Just try to do it in a reasonable, polite manner. Something new?
Yeah, I just want to add that, as far as the density of dog kennels, it's a valid question, but, I don't want to argue with Dollar General's market analysis. They are one of the most successful, fastest growing companies in the country. They are highly successful at picking out markets. It's amazing the places they put these, that they have been successful. This is one of the extremely successful stores. It has a far higher customer base, far higher traffic count than most of the stores that I've been working on lately. So its suitability and its need, I think it's an arguable, and I think that I would give credit to Dollar General for their market analysis.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor? Hearing none. Anyone like to speak in opposition? Mike, introduce yourself, name, address, and try to limit it to a few minutes, please. 3 minutes, please. Turn it on.
I'm Sarah Ballcamp. I'm here representing Smart Growth Bowl. We're a group of citizens who are interested in keeping a balance between development and preservation. We have a pretty large group, but many of us have been involved in land use issues, I'd say, for 40 years. And believe it or not, we're not against everything. Our group is concerned about these two proposals where we're considering the change in the future land use map at the same meeting where we're doing the zone change. Yes, we did call Mr. Grady. We have talked to him through the years. He is a respected lawyer in Woodford County and knowledgeable about zoning issues. And I'm no lawyer, but I did not read into his letter what some of you did, that he was against having this meeting. But I won't argue that point. But he was concerned about having these two things at the same meeting. Mr. Hunter implied there's a trend toward doing that, and maybe that's the case, but we feel like it establishes a precedent and sometimes leads to some hasty decisions. Now, why Mr. Grady could not be here today is because, yes, he has not had his vaccinations, he's younger than I am, and he is a caretaker for his 95-year-old mother, and he did not feel he could come today to talk to you. But in any case, we do oppose the Dollar General store being in this location. The comprehensive plan, as you noticed, does talk about compatibility. Well, I think a school, a small school, and the long existing small building radio station are not economic, commercial. There's not a lot of traffic. There is at the school, but just only at certain times of day. The Dollar General store is going to have constant traffic in and out. And as we've said, it come up a lot about more housing. I have a safety concern about being so close to the roundabout. That bypass has gotten so much use. The traffic flows easily. And Shakertown Road is narrow, hilly, and curvy. And here we're hearing that we're going to have hundreds more houses off of Shakertown Road before the roundabout. This is between there and town. And I think that is it's going to be a dangerous situation. I don't care how far back they move that street. That is a small area. And we talked about, I'm glad you asked about the other stores nearby. Danville and Bull County are small counties. We're not talking about Lexington and Louisville where you have to drive 30 minutes to get to where you're going. Now, you heard, I think all of you were in a very successful November Smart Growth Conference, and we had heard the benefits of long-term planning. And if I've learned one thing here today, it's the need for making our comprehensive plan, our future land use map, what it should be, because Danville and Bull County are special places and always have been, and we attract new residents and new businesses. But the thing we want to see is, we want to see appropriate building. We want to see appropriate residences. The north part of town and the south part of town are completely different, and they get different visitors. Think about that. And I have nothing against the residents of building more houses if we need it. I've talked to a realtor myself about it, about what's needed here in Danville. But let's plan for it. Let's not just, every time we turn around, change the future land use map, change the zoning. That's spot zoning. And it's not a good plan to have. So I encourage you to, I don't know whether you do the future land use map. I'll ask Mr. Smith this. If you amend the future land use map, it's fine, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's fine, there are no appeals.
It is appealable.
What?
It is appealable. It is appealable to the future land use map.
Okay. You can't appeal the decision.
And
Oh, you can appeal. To whom will you appeal? Oh, you mean to a court?
appeal anything.
Yeah, appeal to the court, okay.
Appeal anything we do.
I know that. I really meant you can't appeal it to the governing bodies of your county. All right, if you change the future land use map, then it's settled for within your county unless you go to court. And I'm not threatening anybody to go to court. But a zoning issue is different, right? It has to be approved officially by your governing body, the city or the county. Isn't that true? Yes. So I'll just leave you with those thoughts. I mean, whatever you decide to do, that's your prerogative. But I think a lot of people would agree that we need to deny this request, particularly for the Dollar General store. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak in opposition? Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Brendan Shetland. I'm from the couple office here in town, and I'm been retained by Kay Berger, Jason Bryant, Scott Kleckner, residents of the nearby Streamland subdivision to this proposed development. Kay, my client, she's handed out, I'm only recently retained on Monday, so I haven't been able to get you this in advance, but I've tried to stay short and sweet, which is not always my strong point, but I think I did okay today. Get this to 3 pages of basically bullet points. And I just want to focus on those points. The first thing first, we're treating these 2 items together. I drop down to the 4th one just for a moment. The zoning change is clearly, the proposed zoning change is clearly inconsistent with the current plan, which would be a violation of KRS 100-213 that's come up, the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. The low-density residential, which I believe curiously didn't make it into the staff report, is defined as this land use designation comprises areas designated for single-family development with gross densities ranging from 1 dwelling per acre to 5 dwelling per acre. Full stop. That's all that's authorized. Not commercial, nothing. So if you've got something that's clearly inconsistent, which should be obvious by their trying to amend the plume to try and squeeze this into it. What's important there is under Kentucky law, KRS Chapter 100, is supposed to guide the zoning. The zoning isn't supposed to guide the planning. The Kentucky Court of Appeals has said planning is a prerequisite for zoning. Zoning must conform to planning so as to prohibit indiscriminate ad hoc zoning. I think that's what we have here. When having a car try to drive the waters, we decided we want this commercial, the developer has decided they want this commercial thing, and now they're trying to get the map to meet that desire. That's the opposite of the way it's supposed to work. Second, the plume, we've heard a lot today about what could be, what it should be, what it should aspire to be. We're stuck today dealing with what it is, and what it says, and what's on it in terms of the amendment. Under Kentucky law, landowners have a right to rely on adherence to the plume. And not to mention, that's the stated policy of the comprehensive plan itself. According to the Kentucky Court of Appeals, the comprehensive plan should be a plan for orderly growth. The property owner should be able to rely on it when making investments in real estate and for the protection of land values, which I know is going to be important to a lot of the people here. I'm going to stay focused on the law and on the ordinance, but I'm sure you'll hear plenty of that. The future land use, according to the comprehensive plan itself, future land use map and future land use policy plan delineates the portion of Boyle County that should house nearly all of the community's growth. Any new growth which desires urban services should locate it inside this perimeter. There's also a reference on, and it's on page 5 of your staff report, as to the purpose of Chapter 9 of the comprehensive plan. And it says, a proper and detailed guide to make sound land use decisions to be adjusted only if significant changes occur. And I'll get back to that briefly. But people in Danville, people in Boyle County, under Kentucky law and on their own organizing documents, have a right to believe that the plume is going to be adhered to unless it's time for it to get amended and changed collectively, not piecemeal $1 general at a time. As to the plume amendment that's been requested, under the criteria that they've selected to try to squeeze into, the proposed development doesn't have to be SORTA compatible, doesn't even have to be compatible. You're directed to have to find it to be clearly compatible with the surrounding development for it to be allowed to be amended. This stuff about, well, we can tap the sewers and all that, that is the second hurdle they have to jump over. But the first hurdle is clear compatibility, which I don't think they can come close to meeting. I'll just rattle off a few things. It's a 5-acre lot, it's own agriculture. Everything around it is own agriculture. The plume designates primarily agricultural and low-density residential uses in the surrounding development. There is a postage stamp worth of commercial property that's been there for decades, this radio station. This is not some strip mall that's next to it. The school across the street is not commercial property. It's designated as public use. Moving on, there is no need for another Dollar General store in town. And some of the materials that have been, that my father handed out, there was some debate over how many Dollar Generals and how far they are. You now have that information to the 100th of a mile, how far they are from everything. There are 13 locations of either Dollar General or Dollar Tree within 10.3 miles of the proposed new Dollar General. As well, amongst that 13, there are 3 Danville-based Dollar Generals within 3.32 miles of it. There's no need for this. And the reason need factors into this is in the comprehensive plan, when you're considering commercial development in a residential area, this is on page 9 of the staff report, page 151 of the comprehensive plan, states development of neighborhood commercial areas should be allowed when it can be proved that the need clearly exists. Again, we keep hearing clearly. This isn't supposed to be a close call. It's supposed to be something that's definitive, and here it's definitive, I think, the other way. I think you're going to have a lot of residents and citizens come up and say the same. There's also no significant change in the area that would cause the plume to suddenly be discarded to allow for this. The top page 5 of the staff report, and the purpose of chapter 9 is stated that the comprehensive plan, which is a key part, is a proper and detailed guide to make sound land use decisions, be adjusted only if significant changes occur. That same comprehensive plan details how little Danville's population is expected to grow in the next 20 years. It says, I'm reading from the comprehensive plan, current projections indicate that the population of Danville will increase from 16,218 in 2010 to approximately 16,602 residents by 2030, an increase of just 0.2% from the 2010 population. That's on page 5 of your staff report, page 133 of the comprehensive plan. The local population is in a low growth mode. Why do we need the $14 general in a 10-mile radius? And then, second to last, there's no demonstrated overriding public benefit to this. Now, they haven't sought to squeeze into that criteria, but since it's a criteria for plume amendment, I think that's something to factor in. Nope, not a single person that isn't on the payroll has stood up today and spoke in favor of this development. So if that's the case, if the Dollar General isn't the type of entity, however well-intentioned, it's not going to generate lots of jobs. It's not a factor. It's not great economic benefit to a huge number of, it's not going to change anything for Cook County in terms of a benefit. And then, one thing I'd ask you to also consider is the slippery slope. We've seen here what a decades-old radio station has been sought to justify. What happens when there's a Dollar General store there if we were to be approved? If something that's been there forever and the community's had it forever, never really thought of it as being a commercial zone, if being anywhere near that to be used to put in a Dollar General, what would the Dollar General then be able to justify going in next? So I've tried to recap this as quickly as I could in the letter that you got. I have the Dollar General and Dollar Tree distances that I provided. That comes directly from their respective websites, and I've used, since there isn't an address yet, I don't get to this property, I've used the DCA address directly across the street to get as precise as I could. So, that's all from me.
Thank you. Anyone else got something new like to speak against? Okay.
My name is Kate Bergman, and I emailed you a letter expressing my concerns and my views on the lack of the need for this project, the low employment it would bring to our community, and its negative economic impact it would have for tourism in our county. Sorry. I want you to know that I'm very thankful to be facing commissioners who were appointed for a good purpose, to make decisions that are best for Danville without compromising the integrity of our beautiful historic community. Our forefathers set up planning and zoning for a purpose. You, the Board of Commissioners, were tasked with evaluating and considering each request to measure its impact on our exceptional community. I do not believe that you were set up to feel that you are boxed in, that you can never have a choice on how your role may go. Speaking of planning and zoning, I just have to say, and I'm so sorry to say this, that I was so disappointed this morning to hear the denigration from your employee about someone in the middle of a COVID pandemic where numbers are rising and people are dying, and someone felt they could not be here, and they were denigrated. I just shudder to think that I may someday be a victim of that, from your employee, and I think it was less than stellar comments that were made this morning. The out-of-town developer this morning says he's going to build a Dollar General with one of 5 different materials on the front. That's quite a bit of leeway in what may go there. But by the time the employees roll out onto the sidewalk, their shelving units with all the clearance items and their tables, and then they line up the shopping carts, you almost can't see it, can you? Because they only have 2 or more people, very seldom more than 2 people working in that store, the cardboard boxes are blowing all over the fence lines in the back. Packaging materials are blowing all around. It's a constant mess. My husband worked for the employer, for the landowner, who currently leases to 2 Dollar Generals. Nothing is ever attended to. And it's because those poor employees inside have no chance to take care of anything. The good gentleman here today with Kentucky Lodging and Development, they will only build the store. It is Dollar General corporate who runs it. Why would we want to replace farmland with this? They talked, their attorney just talked about the high foot traffic, the high cars, the number of cars that will be flowing in from other parts to supposedly go to the Dollar General. It's only 3.2 miles from another one, plus the one at Big Lots and the one out by Ace Hardware. Gamble must not say no to all development. My goodness, I love to hear this morning from the distillery and the group that was here from that part. But what we ask from you is positive development that provides jobs for our people and expands our tax base. Development that will do no damage. Some of the citizens that have been involved and helped to put the money together to hire an attorney are not just from Streamland, but they're also from Colonial Heights and other areas. They are concerned about flooding issues, especially with the apartments going up there at Old Shakertown Road. They're worried about displaced wildlife, and I would hate to see a decision based to bring a Dollar General out there based on the fact that a radio station that was there before planning and zoning was ever organized is now considered commercial. Back when you all created the new comprehensive plan and the flume, you had dreams and you had visions and you had goals on how our farmland might be used in Boyle County. I'm quite confident that you did not imagine that another Dollar General store would be built, taking away beautiful farmland. So you were appointed for a very good purpose, and you're serving for that good purpose. I urge you today to use discretion, to use wisdom, and to use discernment today when you vote on this issue, and to vote no to the Dollar General at this location. I thank each one of you.
Ms. Parker, purpose of this hearing is to hear your opinion on the issue at hand, not to criticize one of our employees, and I totally just do not appreciate that comment, and I want that made known. If you have something to say to one of our employees, you say it personally, not in this hearing about this issue.
I'm sorry, Jerry, that I offended you with that, but he made the public hearing. He made the comments this morning in a public hearing about the gentleman that was interviewed. And it could have been presented in a way that wasn't. I'm sorry.
That's an issue you need to take up with him, not in this hearing.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition, please?
Yes, sir. Hello, also. But too much.
Introduce yourself again, please.
My name is Scott Fleckner.
Thank you.
Resident of Danville in Boyle County. I live in Streamland. My family has been here since 1971. I have a petition here, and I can provide that to you, of 320 residents who are opposed to the Dollar General. Very difficult to follow Ms. Berker. She was very well spoken. I'll make this very brief. There are a lot of people here today, many of them who will not speak, but I'd like to give you a voice for one moment. If you are opposed to this and you are here, raise your hand. Thank you, sir. I'm done.
Thank you.
I spoke earlier when you talked about the subdivision.
Introduce yourself, please.
Does that really matter?
Yes. That's why we asked it.
Well, this guy knows who I am, so I'm gonna make sure, you know. I'm James Hinkle.
Microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Gary. You gonna hear me?
Microphone, please.
So, let me, explain a few things. Everybody sitting here lives in
What's your
Bull County,
name,
correct?
please, for the record?
I said it.
Your name, please, for the record?
James Hinkle, I think you know who I am also. Everybody lives in Bull County, correct? I'm asking a question.
I understand, so we're not here to answer your question. We need your opinion on this.
You get my opinion. Everybody lives in Bull County, right?
Share.
Well, why doesn't the director live in Bull County?
That's irrelevant.
It is relevant,
Henry, help me.
because here's the thing. It is when I said on the subdivision, P&Z's job is to protect the community. And if the community is here telling you they don't want something, and you should hear that. KRS, I understand. When you was going to subdivision, you can't stop that. But a zoning change, you all can stop. Mr. Director back here thinks he's the judge, the jury, and the executor. He has said that on more than one occasion.
I'm gonna ask you, does this continue?
No, I'm getting to my point.
Your point is criticizing some of our.
I'm not. I'm telling you the exact words that he has stated.
He didn't say any of that, and I'm not.
He might not have said that.
Tell us what you think about the issue, or sit down.
I'm getting there. So, as
You're
you're
disguising it very
clear,
well.
huh?
You're disguising it very well.
Oh, you want me to?
No,
Oh,
what you're talking about.
Here's my point. It's P&Z's job is to protect the community. And well, apparently not, because these people are here telling you that they don't want
That's why we're
this.
letting you speak as one.
Well, no, you keep arguing, boy. You're not letting me speak. You keep interrupting me. I sit here and listen to 30 minutes of his BS.
Make your points and quit criticizing him. It's a simple thing.
Look, quit interrupting me so I
If
can.
you'll talk about the points, I will.
I can't. You should
Yes,
be
you
talking.
can. Give us point
Hey,
one.
look, yep. You like that kindergarten, right? Zip.
Henry, what I do?
So my point is, I'm for growth in Bull County. I have no problem with that. But with your Dollar General store going in out here, nobody's thinking. You got a high school across the street with 16 and 17-year-old drivers. You're going to put a lot of traffic in that area. These are young, youthful drivers. Nobody thinks. Nobody thought when they put a dog kennel next to my house, I've almost died 3 times, because there's traffic that nobody pays attention. I put my blinker on to turn in my driveway, and they pull out in front of me and think I'm going to a dog kennel. I'm not going to no dog kennel. I'm trying to get home. That's the same problem you're going to have out there with that Dollar General across from that high school. Young kids are going to try to pull out of that parking lot and not expect somebody to pull out in front of them across the street out of the Dollar General. It might be 75 feet. My driveway is 40 feet from the other. It causes problems. You all as P&Z can stop these problems. You were trying to push it to fiscal court. Hey, you need to go to fiscal court and see it. You can stop this stuff right here. You don't have to take it and say, oh, go to your administrative, go to your magistrates, go to fiscal court. Today, these people are asking you to stop it, and you can. I didn't get that opportunity. Mr. Judge, jury, and executor back here said I couldn't come in front of you. But I'm here today speaking about something that don't even really concern me. But because I got screwed over, I don't want to see these other people. These other people are here telling you they don't want something. And I understand Dollar General would love to make the money. I understand Mr. Wise would like to make a little money. I'm for that. But this community, Dollar General's not going to put as much money in here as this community. It's just like one of the biggest employers leave. And guess what county it went to? Lincoln County. Is that coincidence? I don't know. But think about it. Pigeon Creek is leaving this county and going to Lincoln County. This one little Dollar General store ain't gonna make up those jobs. It's irrelevant for it to be out there. They said, well, we got 13 in Mr. Shepherd.
Correct.
We have 13 already in this community. What's 14 gonna do for us? Think about that. I made my point. See, you hush, I got the copy.
To make the point about all the comments too.
It is what it is.
Last one. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Allison Ramsey. It disturbed me when I heard that if we weren't developed, we weren't going anywhere. We did purchase some of Peggy Coel's farm. We didn't buy it to make 1 acre tracts. We bought it to preserve it in farmland. It's in soybeans right now. We face 2168. We do not want to see Dollar General there. We hear sirens every single day and every night on 2168 and on that roundabout, which was poorly developed, poorly made. It's too small for the semis that go around that. They're all over that thing. People drive straight through the roundabout. Sometimes they don't make it. We don't need more traffic on that roundabout and on 2168. The wrecks are horrible, and they're all the time. We don't need more traffic. We don't need more development. That doesn't make us better. The agriculture out there is what makes us special. The cattle are what make us special. And that's what makes this end of the county special. We don't need a Dollar General store there. Thank you.
Thank you. You have something new to present?
I do, or I would not be saying.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Samantha
Turn it
Claker.
on. Turn it on. Thank you.
My name is Samantha Claker, and I'm a resident of Shreveport. And I was not going to speak today, however, I would like to address a couple of points that came up through his careful planning in his presentation. And I noticed that he had said a significant amount of research has gone into planning for the development. And yet I can't give you the name of a single person that I've talked to in my community, Streamland or across the road or down Shakertown, that's been contacted for an input survey from their organization. And if I'm wrong, anybody in here that's been contacted, could you show your hands down? Do any of you know of anyone else in your family or any of your neighbors that have been contacted for input? Okay, thank you. Because I feel like that as a community of stakeholders with direct interest into what happens in that area, that we should have been contacted about this. Also, for numerous people, and I am going to be repetitive with one phrase, the slippery slope. The slippery slope has come up multiple times by all of us. And I would turn that back around on you to say that basically, the slippery slope is to change zoning for the majority of the parcel in question for them to use at their discretion 2 years from now. That is a slippery slope. If the Dollar General store is in fact the urgent priority for development, when I stated before that we already have 13, 14 within a 5-minute drive, I can only imagine what is lower on their priority list for development. Opening Pandora's box is not something that I moved back to one of the greatest small towns in America for, to see this unchecked development. I'm not interested in more McDonald's, I'm not interested in more Dollar General stores. I want to live in an area that's unique, such as Central Kentucky. I want to live in an area that supports small business, that supports local business, that supports actual growth, not what is proposed and what we can clearly see, which is based on the Dollar General store's business plan. I'm not opposed to growth at all. I guess I could just say that I'm opposed to generic growth. If we're going to use the Dollar General as a standard for economic development, then I would say that with 14 in a 10-mile radius, we're already the richest county in the state of Kentucky. Thank you.
again, I don't want to rehash what I said earlier. I just had one item that I thought was important for you all that was, see my letter, but I missed my comments earlier. And it falls up under clear compatibility, and it's number 3 under Roman numeral 3 on page 2. If you look at a quick glance of the aerial photos that are in the staff report, pages 2, 4, 14, really reveals much of the focus has been very, very narrow in terms of, well, there's a school across the street and there's a radio station next door. When you look at the aerial photos, you get a truer glance of what that farmland out there looks like. And if you actually centered those pictures skew a little bit to the south. If you actually centered the development lot, it would be more pronounced, which you can do on the map that's on your own website. So I just wanted to add that thing that I hopefully mentioned earlier.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Something new that we have not heard, please.
Hello, my name is Laura Richard, and I live in Streamland. With regard to the flume issues, it seems to be that P&Z is currently asking the public to make concessions without a clear plan or a vision for intentional growth, and there's been a lot of discussion about what planning and zoning can do within statute, and frankly, a lot of confusion about this. It seems to fall distinctly under P&Z's purview and responsibility to rectify these issues, but as has been mentioned, we have to operate now under what currently exists. And just to be direct, I'm definitely in opposition to this project. And I would like to add further that I have a master's degree in communication and a bachelor's in government, and the planning and zoning process on this is at best confusing and at worst intentionally designed to limit public input and participation. And it's to the credit of the zoning committee that they stuck with the published agenda today. I would like to say that we can do better than the tone of this meeting. It has been incredibly disappointing, and it is not in the best interest of the zoning committee or in the best interest of the city of Danville or Boyle County to establish an adversarial relationship with property owners in this town. And I would like to appeal to the people of Danville and Boyle County, especially property owners, to pay attention to how this process shakes out, because as this gentleman mentioned, they may see someone think we may do. Thank you.
Let me just say, we're not, as planning and zoning, requesting this. It's the planners and developers and the owners that are requesting this. We're just giving everybody an opportunity to express their opinion, hopefully. We come into this totally neutral, and we're not, it's not our plan, it's their plan, presented to all of us. And so, and I heard that, our general store, it's our dollar store, it's not our dollar store. It's going to be, if it's approved there, it's not our, as planning and zoning commission. So, someone used that phrase earlier, and it's zoning store. It's not that at all. This is not our plan at all. This is their plan. We're just here to let you all hear it, and let's hear it. I don't know what format we could do to make this more convenient or easier, if we did it at night, and some of y'all couldn't be here for that, and so, if you've got ideas to make it better and so forth, then, we're open for suggestions, but this is, at this point, according to our attorney and JR, what we're supposed to do.
I have ideas. I'd love to talk with you afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else like to speak against it? We have something new. If not, we'll consider the hearing closed. Public hearing is closed at this point. I'm sorry?
I said I reserved a little bit of time for the vote.
You used a whole lot more time than you were allowed to start with. I don't know how you reserved some. And we're not debating back and forth. We're just getting opinions. So I'm going to politely and hopefully return to him. Commission's prerogative, if we want to hear more from him or close the hearing. Close the hearing or keep it going. Keep it closed. Terry?
This is a traditional public hearing. Mr. Manning raises a good point, which is that he's here on behalf of the applicant as counsel, and this is a quasi-judicial type hearing, and he's allowed to respond to the points that were raised against him. So, Justin, you heard the commission's desire to be kept limited to a certain extent.
Can you limit the time, please, to a real efficient presentation?
The public allowed to funnel to his remote.
No, sir. The applicant is the one who has the right to make their case and then has a right to response.
With that said, yes, I'll try and make this as quick as possible for everybody. Just to address the concerns that have been raised, because obviously we are unaware of those our initial application. In regards to traffic, it's clear that it would be under the 500 a day threshold that would require a traffic study if people are concerned about large traffic in and out. That just further indicates the recognized desired need for the store.
Could you put your mic up closer, please?
Yes, sorry. If people are concerned about a large amount of traffic in and out of this location, that just further indicates the recognized desire of a need for this store. If they argue that there's no need for it, then there wouldn't be traffic concerns. Further, the store would not be a driver of new traffic, it would just be a beneficiary of the current traffic located at this location. And the population was already identified, that since growth is low, migration is the key to be evaluated. That's specifically identified in the comp plan, which is why the proposal is in compliance with the comp plan. If people are concerned and want to fight development in all of these areas, the more equitable and fair thing to do is instead of challenge all these proposals at planning and zoning, would be to buy development rights from all of these properties if they want to keep these preserved. Otherwise, all they're doing is sparing any development efforts and driving down property values and just hurting their fellow constituents. So, the other thing is that the conditions that we have proposed are essentially conceptual. We're willing to discuss those with you all, and we're willing to agree that the remaining acreage is not utilized for the commercial enterprise, the Dollar General up front, not be allowed for any additional commercial uses in the rear, so it could be limited to only residential uses or a public park or something like that. And in regards to that petition with 300 plus signatures, my understanding of what I've been identified and alerted to in regards to that is that the text of the petition was changed after being signed. The text of the petition wasn't even included in this hearing. And in regards to connecting to Streamland subdivision, which was in the initial petition, we've already identified we can and won't connect to that subdivision. We are only connecting to Shakertown Road. And so the last thing is in regards to Mr. Shevlin, the attorney here's comments. I'll just go through his letter pretty quickly. It's the requested zoning change, he says, is clearly inconsistent with the current code. I'm not going to rehash all of my points, but I already identified I have an actual false. It is in compliance with the comp plan and the future land use map. Even if it's not in compliance with the land use map, I already identified that that's not a prerequisite necessary to approve the zone change. He quotes this case here. It says, under KRS Chapter 100, planning is a prerequisite for zoning. Zoning must conform to planning so as to prohibit indiscriminate ad hoc zoning. What he purposely ignores is that later in that case it says the zoning agency is not bound to follow every detail of the land use plan. It is in no sense a final plan and is subject to modification in light of actual land use development. I just found it very pertinent that he ignored that part of that case. He also states in here that the comp plan should be a plan for orderly growth, and property owners must be able to rely on it when making investments in real estate and for the protection of land values. As your own director indicated, we can't because it's not really a future land use map, it's a current land use map. I've also indicated that we can be approved without an amendment to the future land use map. He goes on to say that the future land use policy plan delineates the portion of Boyle County where we're within the city of Danville. That portion of the comp plan is speaking specifically to Boyle County. It has its own separate section for Danville. That's what he should address. Later, in his little 5 bullet points, he says the 5-acre lot on which our Dollar General proposed is zoned agricultural and is entirely surrounded by an agricultural zone. That's patently false. The official zoning map speaks for itself. It's commercial zone across from this. It's public, even though it's a commercial enterprise and a private school across from this. The future land use map designates predominantly agricultural and low-density residential uses in the surrounding development. That justifies the need for the general store, as identified earlier. The comp plan specifically addresses that convenience general stores of similar nature to this are quasi-residential commercial use within the comp plan. And he says that the neighborhood school is designated for public use, not commercial. We obviously argue that that is not correct. It's a private school, but it is a commercial enterprise. And he later said that you've had a lot of public opinion, and his opinions too, that they don't need another Dollar General store. Well, that's their opinion. They can express their opinion, but Dollar General is an extensive market analysis that trumps that public opinion. They have indicated that there is a strong need for this. And the comp plan identifies that migration of the population is a key issue, not growth. So where Mr. Shevlin goes on to say that if there's no significant change in population that doesn't justify a new Dollar General, he's purposely ignoring that the migration of the population is to this area of the city and county, and that migration is what generates this need. Dollar Generals are a very, very successful enterprise, and any complaint that there's multiple ones throughout the county has only bolstered the argument that if they're all sustaining business, there is a need for them. In between our store, to the north, to the south, you can look at the map. There's a large circle, which is largely residential development, without a good convenience general store to serve this area. That's the goal of our application. I don't want to take up any more of your time, so I'll just leave it at that.
This time we will declare the public hearing closed on this issue. Chair is open for a motion to approve or deny.
Specifically, at this point, we're discussing the future land use map amendment, it's not the zone map amendment yet.
Jim,
I make a motion to deny the proposed land use amendment based on the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, public being overwhelmingly against it. I think the company asking for it has not met the directives and criteria to amend the flume as described in Chapter 9 of the Comprehensive Plan. Further, I request that the public evidence and testimony presented in this meeting be included in the motion.
wait a second.
Yes, and let me ask if you would approve these additions to the motion. That is to say that the proposed use is not compatible with surrounding uses. In particular, it's not compatible with the adjacent agricultural use, as well as the intensity of the proposed use and the access onto the road also suggests that the proposed use is not compatible.
Jim, you okay with that? Okay, Vince seconds. Question or discussion on the motion to deny? Hearing none, all in favor? To deny. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those in favor, all those opposed to denying? 2. The motion carries. 5.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
the applicants at this point, Mr. Chairman, have the option of going forward with their zone change, either the approval is denied, or withdraw the application, or what else. So I just sort of lean to them, and if they want to go forward with the zone change, motion and review, at this point in time. Again, I don't anticipate need additional testimony as between board and applicant, but at this point, there's a second motion related to the zone change. And again, I don't know if there needs to be, maybe I'll just turn it over to you, if the applicant's indicated like a decision on the zone change request at the same time.
I think the applicant had indicated that his presentation was a joint presentation both for the Flume Amendment and the zone map amendment. If there's anything you'd like to add, Mr. Chairman, I think the proper thing would be to conduct exactly as we just did, but I think it's shortened by the fact that we've had all the discussion now.
Item 4, Kentucky Light and Development Company Incorporated and Peggy Wackel, a well irrevocable trust to file the application for zone property and tract of land containing 5.0 acres located at 0 Shaker County Road, Danville, requested zone changes from agriculture to general business.
Yes, the only thing that I'd like to add, pursuant to my previous presentation, is that as here to make you aware, public concern is not a factor to be considered in regards to the statute specifies what you're supposed to consider and go through and analyze. Public concern can weigh on that, but it's not a factor to be considered. So we are moving forward with this.
Anyone else like to speak in favor of the zone change? Hearing none, anyone like to speak in opposition to the zone change? Hearing none, we'll consider this public hearing closed. This time, chair is open for a motion to deny or approve the zone change as requested. Yes, Jim.
Mr. Board, may I go ahead and suggest my additions to that? I would suggest that the denial be premised on inconsistency with the comprehensive plan, specifically the future land use map amendment, as well as the goals and objectives of preserving green space, limiting access onto arterial roads. And I would suggest that under Chapter 9, where we look at compatibility with zone map amendments as well, that it's incompatible with the adjacent agricultural use and educational institution, and it does not promote the goal and objective of a safe transportation system.
Thank you. Motion's been made to deny. So, Vince seconds. Can you repeat that again? Lead up again. I would like to repeat again. Your three conditions again for me.
Certainly. Okay. Can you understand? Can everyone understand what I'm saying? All right. My suggested additions are to address compatibility with the comprehensive plan, because that's the premise on which they've applied. So you find that it is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically the future land use map. It doesn't match what's reflected on there. It's also inconsistent with the goals and objectives of preserving green space, of limiting access points onto the adjoining road, and it is also under Chapter 9's land use compatibility assessment. It's not compatible with adjacent agricultural use and educational institution, and it does not promote the goal of maintaining a safe and efficient transportation system.
Okay, got a motion to deny and a motion to second.
Jerry, I have a question.
Yes.
Do we have to agree with everything you just said?
No, you can definitely pick and choose.
Second amendment. Thank you. Any other questions? Discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to deny? Passes unanimously. Item 5.
Mr. Chairman, for the folks for that case leave, I want to make sure we let them know, this is only a recommendation on a zone change request. The case then has to go to the city commission for final action.
When will that meeting be?
We will forward that to them probably tomorrow, and it'll just be on their docket as time fits between the city and the applicant, their attorney, city attorney, et cetera. The Flume amendment is final action in this body, and is appealable, as we heard our attorney say, the zone changes of recommendation only to the parent government, which would be the city and the city. Thank you. I'm ready to go case 5 and 6.
So this goes from here to the city commissioner?
City commissioners are the next step, assuming the applicant, they have options.
Okay.
Correct, thank you.
Item 5, Mike Harris. Mike Harris is allowed to
Hey, guys, we still have 2 more cases.
Here's us.
We have 2 more cases to go
Make
through.
conversation outside, please. We need to continue with our meeting. Thank you. Mike Harris has filed a future land use map amendment from low density residential to mixed use residential property located at 2366 Fairville Road, Hamilton.
All right, so this case is going to read a lot like the last one. It's 2 applications. It's a Flume amendment request and a zone change request to general business. I'm not going to go through all the stuff in staff report. I think we just heard it. I'll just tell you that we had an application filed on January 6th. The applicant is Mike Harris. Location of property is 2356 Fairville Road. Hey, can you guys step outside?
Please.
Hey, can you guys step outside? Thank you. Property size is 19.482 acres. Current Flume is low density. Proposed Flume mixed use residential. The zoning is ag and R1A. It is split zone. And the proposed rezoning is general business, which again allows the flexibility of commercial or residential or a mix thereof. Won't get into all the policies. They're on page 3 of your staff report, page 4 of your staff report. Page 5 is the same Danville language we just talked about with the Flume. Page 6 again talks about residential and the future land use map, and in this case, same as we heard. 7 is the future land use compliance. 8 is the application of the Flume. Again, this is a joint application for both, the same dual motions. The guidance for residential development on 8, maps on 9, and then the conditions are on 10. Again, the applicants put forward 8 development conditions in great detail there on page 10. The proposal is to amend the Flume to mixed use residential, and the applicant conditions describe how much square footage would be and the combination. So it says it could be up to 400,000 square foot of commercial and possibly up to 200 residential units. More than likely it will be a combination or a split. This is very similar to a zone change we've done on 19 acres in a different part of town, those kind of numbers. Likely it won't be at either path, but below. So the applicants put forward some conditions to build some flexibility for what the future development plan will be. Lots of things about buffers and green space in those standards, and a specific landscape buffer that's a nice touch, that's 25 foot wide, that far exceeds our zoning ordinance requirement. Deals with parking lots, driveways, etc. Says that any residential units will have garages, connected sewer, and underground utilities. Concept plans on page 11 with the same conditions put on that concept plan. Page 12, staff items of concern, very similar to the last one. Obviously, project compatibility, and then this Danville Flume, excuse me, in commercial land use directive that seems to be in conflict. Our KRS 100-213 findings are on page 12, and our motions up or down are on page 13 and 14. And again, the Flume request is being made as a precursor under the authority of our Chapter 9 comprehensive plan and the KRS, and then the motion for a zone change amendment is at the back. And again, depending on the nature of the Flume request, the zone change would then be considered one way or the other at the discretion of the applicant. I'm glad to answer your questions. This is obviously, again, the property is on Highway 150, cat corner, just a tad bit from that Shell station and Bluegrass Pike. Property, and I skipped by this fast, I know we've been there a long time, but I guess I should point out the future land use map on page 9. As you see, a lot of purple on that map. So This property, the low density, is actually ag and resident and low density, the future. But you see there's a large chunk of commercial directly to the east, a lot of commercial, right next to this property. Now, it's asking to go to mixed-use residential, which then allows a mixed use of commercial and residential development. Applicants here, as well as the development team, and I'll be glad to answer specific questions from you guys on the commission. And again, I'm rolling through this just simply because of time and our rental agreement. Where's she at? No, I'm just kidding. We stay as long as you guys need to, but I'm glad to answer any questions you might have specifically on that. Again, the applicants back here with the development team.
Questions for Steve? Staff report? Thank you, Steve. Yes, sir. Hear from the applicant at this time, please.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
My name is Mike Harris, and Steve summed it up very well. I have nothing really to add to that except this all started because there's not going to be any agriculture on that 19.4 acres. It's wet as can be. I mean, if you're farming frogs, you can pretty well. But it's never going to be ag, and I just simply want to get rid of that. And so whatever the process is, that's what we're doing.
Ken Wise from Vantage Engineering, I just had a few comments about infrastructure, but you may or may not help, I don't know. The project is, the way the sewer sheds are set up right now, the watershed in this area, Mr. Harris's property would probably be the last property that can drain sewage back.
Turn it up,
Okay, I'm sorry. It seems like it's glaring right back at me, so but Mr. Harris's property, because of the elevation of the property, the way the watersheds are, will likely be the last property to drain that's elevated high enough that sanitary sewer can drain back toward the city of Danville. This property doesn't have sewer on it at this time, but it's across the road, and it could be extended to allow the development to be connected to the public system. So I feel like it's, we're kind of at a point where something else has to happen. His could be appropriately served by public utilities, whereas anything beyond that, you'd have to look at putting in a pump station or something other drastic that would add to the burdens of the city's work. But, and then the mixed use, I mean, when you look across the road, you see gas stations, you see multifamily housing, and you see single-family housing, you see a movie theater, there's a hotel, so mixed use residential, and it's perfectly within what we see out there in the same properties. You glad to answer any other questions about the survey or
questions for Kendall?
Infrastructure.
Kendall, for my information, almost brain dead at this point. I apologize. Can you just repeat kind of what the plan is for this, if you don't mind?
Well, the plan is fairly open, but it would be a mixture of commercial and residential housing. Someone with a vision would have to come in and establish what portion of it would be residential and which portion of it would be commercial. It's a blank slate right now. How many acres? 30 acres or so. But there would be opportunity to have some residential up front and or commercial up front. And it could all be, it's not defined, so it's hard for me to just explain to you what it could be. But in general, it could be a lot of things. It could be multifamily, it could be single family homes, and
Other questions? Anything else for Kendall?
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
So basically, the property that the house is on stay the same, right? And then it would be developed on the other side of the property that your house is on, Mike? Is that correct? Yeah, that's all. Get a better picture of it.
Anything else? Questions? You got answered, okay, Vince? Did you get your answer?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Anyone else like to testify in favor of this request? Anyone like to testify in opposition to this request?
Sarah Lockham, shaking right hand. I'm really not for or against it. Did you say there are no public utilities out there? Or I didn't understand what you said. At the present time, the public utility boundary is not out there? What?
The property is on the part of the city land.
Okay.
It's sewer across the road, so sewer is in place.
You could, but the utilities are there for, in that urban zone. Okay, I just didn't understand.
The part might have been, once you go beyond the rest of the property, sanitary sewer is not going to be option.
Okay, I just didn't understand. You know, I don't know, it seems near other development, so it doesn't seem like, if you said that you're not going to do a lot of farming out there, so go ahead.
Thank you.
Sally Bryant, Danville. And my only objection to this is much of the same that's been, you can't hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. It's much of the same that we talked about earlier with the other one. Amending the future land use map and doing the zone change at the same time. It just doesn't seem like the best way to do things to me, to just be changing things piecemeal as you go along. I wish that we could fix the future land use map problems and, because then it's easy, you go by the comp plan. I mean, that's what you always go by, so that's my thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Hearing none, we'll consider the public hearing closed unless there's anything else, Kendall, you want to present or the applicant.
First order of business is employment. The first order of business would be the Flint Amendment, and I will say that when you look at the comprehensive plan map for future land use right now, the way that it describes Mr. Harris's property is low density residential. Immediately adjacent to that is also a commercial land use designation. So what we're requesting isn't that much different. I mean, once it's changed, it will actually, I think there is actually there's a mixed use residential designation on the map. So I guess it will actually change the map, but it's not as if this is designated as agricultural land use.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kendall or Mr. Parrish? Okay, hearing none, then we'll consider the public hearing closed. Anything Henry want to add?
I'm ready to assist on any motion that's made.
The chair is ready for a motion.
amendment, together and conditioned upon the general development plan conditions submitted by the applicant. Based on the testimony and documents presented in the public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted 2017 comprehensive plan as demonstrated.
We're doing the Flynn amendment first. It sounds like you're in the zoning map amendment.
Where did that? Sorry. Read the wrong one. I make a motion to approve this future land use map amendment based on the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed Flume amendment has met the directive to amend the Flume as outlined in Chapter 9 of the comprehensive plan. Furthermore, I request this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
If I might suggest some additions, and I want to be sure the commissioners, can you all understand? Okay. When we consider land use map amendments, we talk about compatibility and capacity. I would suggest adding to the motion that we find that the proposed land use map amendment is compatible with adjoining properties. Those are commercial uses and residential uses of varying density, and the proposed zoning and land use map will be compatible with those. Furthermore, the developer's conditions of a greenway and a landscape buffer also help with the compatibility of the proposed land use map amendment. In terms of capacity, the developer's engineer testified that the property could be appropriately served by public utilities, and the developer conditions also address connecting the sanitary and burying underground communication and utility lines.
Vince, good with that?
I'm okay with that.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion to approve. Need a second? Sam. There you go. Sam seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Now we go to item 6, Henry. Item 6, do we need testimony on this, Henry, or how do we need to do that?
To the applicant, I think your presentation suffices. If you'd like to add anything.
Anything you want to add? Prayer? Nothing to add? Anyone want to testify, speak in favor of the zone change? Hearing none, anyone want to speak in opposition? Hearing none, we'll consider this hearing closed on the requested zone change. Henry, anyone make a motion to approve or deny? Vince?
I can do it.
That's okay.
I was getting good at reading it, you know.
It's up to you.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan conditions submitted by the applicant. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted 2017 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the following items. It is consistent with the future land use map, and it is consistent with the adopted goals and objectives. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that the motion be included the summary of the evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
To flesh that out, I would suggest that the goals and objectives with which it is compatible are the promotion of small business development and the protection against adverse impacts, and the developer's proposed conditions do protect against the adverse impacts of development.
All right, I'll initial that.
Thank you. The second. Steve second. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. New business, any Steve? No. No, sir. Motion to adjourn?
Yes. Personal privilege? Ma'am?
Yes.
Next time I complain about one of our meetings, you guys have got us beat. And I really appreciate what you all do.
I said that any longer.
What's that?